Immortal Cultivation in the Cybernetic Milky Way. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyright or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 226. Rampage. The network signal of Tycho 5 was only tripped for more than 10 seconds before it was restored. Nanling breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that it should be fine, right? Fanny swallowed hard and asked, "What did you do?" Li Ji also said with lingering fear, "Fortunately, my consciousness did not remain on the network. If I had stayed on the network, I might have really died just now. Digital life is not as strong as imagined, because once the original data carrying their self-consciousness is gone, it is almost the same as death. Only digital gods can copy their consciousness data thousands of times, and as long as any backup exists, they can make a comeback." Nanling actually thinks that the evolutionary path of this digital life is quite similar to the golden elixir and tuning of the cultivator. Can't the tuning of the cultivator also split into thousands of clones when he practices to a high level? Fanny said, "Okay, I'm going to meet up with my father next. Who will come with me?" Nanling immediately raised his hand to sign up. Mo shook his head helplessly and said, "How can I let you two go alone for such a matter?" Li Ji pondered for a moment and said, "Take my prosthetic body and my burnt brain with you." Nanling said, "In this case, I'm afraid your consciousness will be in danger." "What if they?" Li Ji interrupted and said, "What if my consciousness is not here at all? I will transfer my consciousness to the Zhuoxia. If the channel is unobstructed, it won't even take a second. This prosthetic body is just my abandoned body. You can just use it." After she became a digital life, it seemed that her perspective on her own existence had also changed. Physical life was no longer something she needed to care about. After a discussion, everyone quickly decided on a plan, and then Li Ji's consciousness disappeared here along the network cable, and then went online on the Zhuoxia. She said, "Zhuoxia's firewall seems to have many loopholes. I will upgrade it first. By the way, I found that I still have so much knowledge in the digital field to learn, and I found that I still have so many defects." Her voice lacked some human emotions and had more cold mechanical texture. Nanling shook his head. "What about digital life? This is just a beginning after all. No one can help Li Ji on how to go next." At this time, Li Ji suddenly chatted with him privately. "There is a big problem with your smart core. I will make you a firewall and remove those backdoors, by the way." Nanling quickly said, "No, I think my smart core with backdoors is particularly good now. Is he going to keep it to continue to cheat people? By the way, do you know why the network was disconnected earlier?" Li Ji paused for a moment and said, "Because the load of the network server suddenly surged to more than 50%, and the huge amount of redundant information is still expanding, so they had to shut down the server and use the backup one." "Ha, I see, you are poisoning your own intelligence core, and then anyone who tries to use the intelligence core to attack you will be attacked by you in return." Li Ji became happy, and she suddenly became human again, and began to think, "This is a good idea, information dirty bomb. Let me think about it. This thing is more useful than 10 main guns when necessary." Nanling was relieved. Li Ji was obviously adapting to her identity as a digital life quickly, and her human emotions were still there. Next, the group took the two captives and Li Ji's prosthesis and fought all the way back to Chuxing. On the way, Thongqi met up with them and brought a message. "My father and the others followed Master Ge Chen to the door, and it is said that the Ge family's family law enforcement department has been alerted." Fanny exclaimed, "Family law enforcement department? Then we have to hurry, otherwise we will get nothing if we go too late. This idea is really unique." However, Nanling knows Boss Fanny's mind too well. He directly accelerated the aircraft he was driving, and then rushed to Ge Chuan's mansion. To be honest, there is a price for his reckless rush. The value of the special flight certificate is that Chuxing will not directly shoot down their aircraft because of his mistake at this time, but will change to a post-incident investigation. But who cares? He found that the special flight certificate he took was almost useless, so it is better to maximize its value at this time. Mo obviously realized this. She said helplessly, "You are like this." Nanling interrupted, "What are you afraid of? Anyway, I don't go out much. This is just a certificate." Fanny also understood after hearing this, and was very moved. She immediately said, "Mo, go back and give Xion a raise. You must raise it." Nanling was very happy to hear this. Another salary increase? It's only been a few days. It really deserves to be the flat management of the Juoxia Adventure Group. The boss is generous. His annual salary just increased to 400,000 2 days ago. Another increase this time? Mo said helplessly. Okay, then the basic salary will be increased to 500,000, and the bonus will be counted separately. Fana said indifferently. You two can discuss this matter between yourselves. The boss is generous. Can they discuss this matter? If the boss of any company could let the personnel and employees under him do this, the company will be finished in minutes. Believe it or not, Mo's ethics are really good. And Nanling also has his own ethics and bottom line. Is he short of money? No longer lacking. The warm wind finger technique is a big seller in the ancient domain, and he now has a deposit of nearly 5 million, and is still accumulating it slowly. Although it is not much, it is undoubtedly enough for him personally. He can even rely on the copyright of that spell to live a worry-free life from now on. He just likes the feeling of a salary increase. Then, after violating many traffic regulations of Chuxing, the flying boat driven by Nanling rushed directly into the location of Gikchuan's mansion. Nanling's mind swept downwards and immediately saw Yu Chen and his group blocking the door of Gikchuan's mansion. Oh, that group of people looks familiar, Xin, Thongshu, etc. Are all his drinking buddies? Nanling had also vaguely realized that his drinking buddy circle might be related to Yu Chen, but now he is just sure of it. At this time, Gikchuan's mansion raised a defensive barrier, and Yu Chen, the boss, took turns to bombard it with spells, which actually made the barrier shaky. Nanling saw the situation and immediately sent a message. Uncle Yu, get out of the way. Watch me. As he said that, he drove the luxurious flying boat with its own defense shield and rushed down at an accelerated speed, while shouting loudly, "The eldest lady is here, everyone get out of the way." He once again turned into a lackey. However, Yu Chen only had time to reply with one message. Wait, boom. What are you waiting for? Nanling has already crashed into it. The originally shaky shield could not hold up at all and shattered on the spot. Then the whole flying boat fell to the ground with a bang, knocking down the outer wall of Gikchuan's mansion, and rushed all the way in, plowing long gullies on the ground, and it is unknown how many things were destroyed along the way. Of course, as a price, this luxurious flying boat that Fanny won is probably scrapped. But the people in the flying boat did not suffer much impact. Mo's face was already a little pale, thinking about how to exonerate her husband, while Fanny was trembling with excitement. It's so satisfying, so satisfying. Fanny kicked open the deformed entrance of the flying boat, ran outside and laughed with her hands on her hips. Ha ha ha, you still have to look at me, you have been fighting here for a long time but you didn't even get in, it's so embarrassing. Yu Chen said with a gloomy look. Well, now there is really no room for maneuver. Obviously, Yu Chen is still very calm, he has always been keeping a balance. But now, he looked at the time, and then said to his men. The Family Law Enforcement Department will arrive in 10 minutes. Let's beat them up in these 10 minutes, just don't let anyone die. At this moment, the darkest moment of Gikchuan's mansion came. Chapter 227 Family Law Enforcement Team. The situation in Gikchuan's mansion was so miserable. A group of aggressive and rough men rushed in, and they beat up anyone they caught. However, these rough men were very measured in their actions. They tried not to touch the women, and only beat up the men. After all, beating up the women might cause trouble. Oh, there was no trouble, because Nanling also saw a cold and frosty older sister among the group of rough men. She specifically attacked the women who dared to exist in Gikchuan's mansion, and her methods were extremely brutal. Nanling was shocked. He felt that with this group of arrogant people present, he had no room to play. Oh, Uncle Gu and the others are too brutal. There is nothing I can do. He sighed. Xin, who was passing by, heard it at the time. He patted Nanling on the shoulder and said earnestly, "You have done enough. I will bring you some good wine later." At this time, Thongshu also came over and said, "Are you organizing a party?" "Okay, I will come too." Immediately, people responded one after another. It seems that this group of people love drinking, eating meat and fighting the most. Boom. At this moment, with an explosion, a figure appeared in front of Nanling flying backwards. At this time, Fana had just blown a guy away, and then she rushed up and waved her fists. Really, he is obviously a Jindan cultivator, but he likes to use fists to solve problems when fighting. However, Nanling noticed that the brothers around him seemed to use fists to solve problems. Xin patted his shoulder and said, "This is called mutual fighting. At most, you'll be arrested and locked up for 2 days, but using weapons is committing murder, which is a serious crime. Nanling was shocked when he heard this. How could he have such rich experience? Then he suddenly realized that his previous behavior seemed to be problematic, so he asked, "Then what should I do? I just drove that flying boat directly into it." Zhen gave him a thumbs up and said, "You are really brave, but don't worry, the worst case scenario is that you will be expelled from Chugyu Academy. You have to know that Chugyu Academy is the highest place for knowledge inheritance in the ancient domain, and its academic records are still very useful when necessary." Nanling immediately understood what he meant and exclaimed, "Wow." At this time, Ge Chen happened to pass by here and heard their whispered conversation. He said silently, "Zhen, can't you teach this child something good? He is the husband chosen by Mo herself." Zhen's expression immediately straightened up, and then said, "Most choice, I absolutely support it." As he said that, he hooked his arm around Nanling and asked again, "We have a good relationship, right?" Nanling nodded repeatedly and said, "Of course, we're friends." Ge Chen's mouth was cramping at the time. He slapped his forehead and groaned weakly, then said, "I don't want to pay attention to you, but Xiaonan, you still have a chance to get away with this. You just need to find a way to make it on accident." Nanling suddenly got the idea, and he said, "Make it an accident? That's easy, my intelligence core is hacked." Ge Chen. ... Is it true? Fan had already beaten one of Yu Chuan's sons into a pig's head at this time, and then walked over and said, "Of course it's true, you don't know, that little bitch Ge Qingfei actually used her authority to control Xiaonan's intelligence core." Nanling immediately said, "My intelligence core has reached 81% of its memory load. It's normal to have some problems, right?" Ge Chen was stunned when he heard this, and then he immediately said to Fan and I, "Be careful with your words. Don't always use insulting descriptions on Miss Qingfei. After all, her status is not comparable to ours." To describe the two girls Ge Qingfei and Ge Fan and I in a more understandable way, then Ge Qingfei is the eldest daughter of the main family, and Fan and I is the eldest daughter of a branch of the Ge family. Generally speaking, the role of a branch family is to protect the main family, which is very realistic. Of course, the class of both parties is not insurmountable. Anyway, Ge Chen and Fan and I, father and daughter, have the potential to cross this boundary, that is, cultivation. As long as any one of them can enter the nascent soul stage, no matter what their status in the Ge family was before, they are qualified to participate in the core decision-making level. Ge Chen pondered for a moment and said, "This is good news. If it is really as you said, then this time we will not suffer any losses, but will be able to gain a lot." Then he said with a bright look, "I will host you tonight, and it is rare for everyone to get together." A group of men cheered loudly, and they seemed to be very enthusiastic about this kind of gathering led by the boss. At this time, a special spaceship passed by quickly and appeared in everyone's sight. Then people came out of the spaceship one after another, all with long red hair. All of them were inheritors of the Ge family bloodline. They were all Jindan cultivators, with cold expressions and eyes like blades sweeping across the scene. The leader shouted angrily, "Stop!" But no one stopped. Ge Chen smiled coldly when he saw this, and then clenched his fist with one hand and said, "Give the face of Captain Yuanzu of the execution team, stop." Ge Yuanzu's facial features can be regarded as outstanding. In fact, the people of these big families have been genetically modulated and optimized for generations over the years, and their faces are not bad. However, the Captain Yuanzu of the Family Law Enforcement Department had an indescribable sense of oppression when his facial features were put together. People did not think he was good looking at all, but rather a little scary. Ge Yuanzu sneered at Ge Chen and said, "It is hard to imagine that the words of the captain of the Family Law Enforcement Department are not as effective as yours." Ge Chen said indifferently, "If they really listened to you and stopped, would they still be my followers? Everyone in my Ge family has retainers, and you also have your followers. You should understand this principle." Ge Yuanzu said, "Then you condoned your followers to attack the Ge family members. Do you admit this crime?" Ge Chen said frankly, "I admit it." Ge Yuanzu said, "Very good, since you admit it, please come with us once, and let the elders of the clan judge the crime." As he said that, he signaled to the left and right to come up and take the people. Seeing this, Fanna looked anxious, but Nanling held her and said, "Don't worry, don't you see that others are not anxious? Uncle Gyu has his own response." Fanna calmed down a little. At this time, Mo also came to her side, and she didn't say anything. But for Fanny, Nanling and Mo standing on her left and right, she felt a lot more at ease, as if there was a way to overcome any difficulties. The 3 members of the family law enforcement team just touched Yi Chen's body. As a result, Yi Chen's spiritual power cleverly twisted, and the 3 Jindan stumbled and fell away. Yi Chen said coldly with his hands behind his back. What does it matter? Isn't it just an attack on the same tribe? No one died on their side, and the most serious punishment is exile to the border. I'm too lazy to go with you. You can go back and let the elders of the tribe make the most serious judgment. You see, I lose if I frown. A strong smell of rolling meat rushed to my face. Yi Yuan was furious. He said, you are not afraid, so why don't you consider your daughter? Fanny raised her eyebrows and said happily, hurry up and send my father to the border, then no one will take care of me. Yi Chen almost couldn't hold it in. Then he looked at Yi Yuan with a painful face and said, look, I have nothing but this daughter now. For some reason, this scene suddenly made people sympathize. Nanling felt that Uncle Yi Chen was also magical. He should have taken the route of a tough guy, but why did he take the route of selling misery? Looking at the heartless Fanny, Nanling felt that this matter still made sense. Chapter 228 Family's Justice. Regardless of whether Yi Chen was playing the victim or not, his behavior was still very tough. Yi Yuan did not dare to force him, and could only stand aside angrily waiting for the order from the superiors. Because it was impossible to take action, after all, there was a gap in the Jindan stage. The Jindan level was 10, but Yi Chen was already at the 9th level, which was definitely the late Jindan level. Yi Yuan was at the 5th level, and the rest were at most at the 3rd level. The gap between the 4 levels was already very huge. However, at this moment, Nanling's expression moved, and he suddenly felt a fluctuation in the spiritual power between heaven and earth on this Chuxing. Then he felt the abnormal gathering of fire spiritual power, and then a human figure composed entirely of fire spiritual power appeared in front of everyone. Elder, make the decision for me. A cry came, and a fat pig-like red-haired man staggered out of the ruin step by step. This was Kukchuan. What's more, there were more than a dozen beautiful girls and their children behind him. Nanling's fist hardened on the spot. Is this the guy who asked to take his family's mo? He would not be so angry if it was his son. He had never seen such a shameless bastard. At this time, a powerful divine consciousness swept across the whole place, and the crying and shouting stopped immediately under the infinite pressure. Then the human figure formed by the fire spirit power fixed the divine consciousness on Yi Chen and Yi Chuan, and uttered a neutral and peaceful voice. What is going on? Yi Chuan immediately rushed out and said, Yi Chen, it is this bastard Yi Chen. He brought people to smash my mansion directly. Poor my whole family, we will be homeless. Then there was another round of crying. Yi Chen was calm and had no intention of appealing. He just waited patiently until Yi Chuan could no longer cry, and the flame spirit of the clan elder spoke again. Yi Chen, what do you say? Yi Chen smiled gracefully and saluted. My nephew has nothing to say. Even if you beat him up, it doesn't matter. Just ask the clan elder to send me into exile. He was very calm, and even Yi Chuan was stunned. How could you ask for the most severe punishment like this? Didn't he just come in and beat him up? This kind of thing can be big or small. At the most, it's an attack on the same tribe, and at the least, it's just a regular fight. The elder of the tribe, who was the incarnation of fire, said in a relaxed tone, Don't make trouble. Why should you be exiled to the border for such a small matter? Yi Chuan felt uncomfortable at the time. This is called a small matter. His house was demolished, okay? Yi Chen said lightly. Please punish me severely, elders. After all, my nephew thinks that although this Chuxing is good, it is too noisy. My father and I are not very safe here. It just so happens that I have gained something recently. It's better to find a quiet and deserted place to stay, so that I can try to break through the realm. Good guy. The whole audience was silent after this statement. Yi Chen is already at the 9th level of the Golden Core. If he breaks through the realm again, he will be at the 10th level of the Golden Core. And the 10th level of the Golden Core is one step further than the Nascent Soul. Yi Chen's words successfully reminded everyone of his potential and current abilities. The elder pondered for a moment, and suddenly changed the subject. Is little Fanny okay? Fanny was surprised for a moment, then smiled brightly and said, Not okay, I don't think it's okay at all. The elder asked kindly, Oh? What's wrong? Fanny immediately said, My best friend was forced to marry by someone of my uncle's generation, forcing her to stay away from home for a long time. My good friends and good brothers can't even control their own intelligence cores here. I don't know what they did when they were invaded. As she spoke, her eyes began to fill with tears, and then her lips pursed slightly with a hint of tears. She said, "The most important thing is that my good sister Liji, who has always helped me a lot, although she is a cyborg, they actually killed her directly. This Chugiv star really doesn't welcome me. Is this really my hometown? Good guy, this is so emotional, and the acting skills are absolutely full." However, Nanling found that Fanny's emotional fluctuations were indeed very strong, and he realized that maybe she was really sad. Looking at the flame incarnation of the Elder again, Nanling could not see any emotional aura on it. But the Elder's reaction was very powerful. He suddenly shouted angrily, "Such a wicked thing actually happened on Chuxing. Did someone really die?" Nanling was extremely alert and immediately brought out the two people from Gukshuan Mansion that they had captured and Liji's prosthetic body. Although he knew that the other party must have already detected these situations with divine thoughts, it was different to officially announce them to the public. The flame incarnation said immediately, "It seems to be true. I didn't expect that there would be such unfilial descendants doing evil on my Chugiv star. Gipchuan, stop what you're doing. I think you really need to reflect on yourself." The fat man's expression collapsed at the time. He knelt on his knees and cried, "Uncle, this won't work. If you stop all my affairs, my whole family will not be able to survive." But the flame incarnation didn't even look at the fat pig, but just looked at Fanny and said, "Little Fanny, if you encounter any trouble on Chugiv Star in the future, you can ask your uncle to make a decision for you. Don't bear it alone. You are also the eldest lady of my Give family." He was extremely kind and warm, as if he had always been the old uncle who doted on this great niece. But Nanling saw only cold interests in this. What the elder of the Give family values is probably the future of Give Chen, or Fan. From this, it can be seen that there is no fairness. There is only the interests of the Give family. This elder obviously stood in the interests of the Give family, and then made a fair judgment in a very principled manner. Give Chuan cried again, "Uncle, uncle. I don't accept it, I don't accept it." The flame incarnation still ignored him, but pointed at Give Yuanzu and said lightly, "Execute the family law." Give Yuanzu immediately accepted the order and said, "Yes, elder." Then a series of light screams appeared and disappeared in front of him, and Gu Chuan sat there in a daze. He found that all the industries he originally controlled were no longer under his name. Except for two companies that were completely registered with his personal funds, all the Give family industries he operated were stripped away. After doing all this, the flame incarnation turned to Gu Chen and said, "Okay, if you want to retreat, you can retreat on this Chugiv star. The environment here is much better than those barren planets." Gu Chen seemed to thank him reluctantly. "Thank you for your help, uncle." The flame incarnation said gently and lovingly, "It's my duty." As soon as the voice fell, it disappeared on the spot again. Nanling was a little curious. Was this the end of the matter? There was no rambling. It was completely decided by the elder of the Give family. But thinking back, it seemed normal. After all, in the eyes of the elder of the Give family, Give Chen was much more valuable than Give Chuan. Give Chuan was still in disbelief. He seemed still unwilling to believe why everything about him collapsed at this time. Give Chen looked at Give Chuan calmly and said, "I know you were upset. You think you have strong business talents. I don't understand why that family gave up so easily." He smiled cruelly and said, "In fact, the answer is very simple. Do you want to know?" Give Chuan came back to his senses. He looked at Give Chen and said, "Then please teach me, brother." Give Chen said, "Because the Give family does not need the money you earn, but it always lacks a union cultivator to keep the place." Give Chuan was stunned on the spot. He suddenly realized one thing. It seemed to be a very stupid thing for him to be an enemy of Give Chen all the time. As Give Chen's cultivation level became higher and higher, this seemed more and more stupid. Fanny frowned and asked, "So are we just going to let the invasion of the Nanzi Corps go?" Nanling and Mo pulled her from the left and right. After being stunned, they smiled at each other. Mo said, "Don't worry about it. This is not something that can be brought to the table." Chapter 229 Celebration Banquet. The farcing Give Chuan's mansion ended with Give Chen Group's great victory. This is a very realistic result, because Give Chen Group has a better prospect than Give Chuan. The only thing that makes people a little uncomfortable is that there seems to be no explanation for the wanton invasion of Nanling's intelligence core by Concubine Yu King. No one doubts that the higher-ups don't know about this, because Concubine Yu King's method is so clumsy that such things can be known by simply checking. Give Chen Group is preparing for the celebration banquet. He saw Nanling thinking about something, so he came forward to ask, "Why, are you still dissatisfied with what happened today?" Nanling shook his head and said, "Wait and see." He wanted to see if the Ge family's top management had any follow-up on this. After all, what happened today was strictly speaking very bad. As a follower of Fan and I, Li Ji died in theory, which was a loss of life and violated the internal rules of Ge's children. If you can't even protect your own subordinates and can't avenge them, who would be willing to follow Ge's people? In addition, Nanling's intelligence core was invaded. In fact, the reason for this incident is the same as that of Li Ji's capture. They are all people with high authority who directly disregard the rules and use their authority to do bad things. Nanling really wants to see what kind of punishment this unscrupulous young lady will eventually get. Of course, if the other party has nothing to do, he has no opinion. After all, her power and status are overwhelming him, right? At this time, a cold and frosty elder sister came over, and she said in a cold voice, "Ge Chen, I don't think it is appropriate to hold a banquet today. After all, Fan has lost her follower." Nanling was quite surprised. He looked at this elder sister and quickly got her information. Baishan, the former chief of internal affairs of the Chiling fleet, has now resigned. He immediately knew that this was a very powerful elder sister. And he unexpectedly found that Ge Chen immediately showed an embarrassed look after hearing Baishan's words. He said to everyone at the time, "Everyone, I'm sorry that I didn't think it through. Today, my daughter Fan lost her follower, and it really shouldn't be so joyful." Good words. Nanling looked at Ge Chen with a strange look, and then noticed that Fan and I, who should have been noisy, shrank into the corner without saying a word when Baishan was talking. Nanling curiously asked Mo secretly, "This elder sister Baishan seems to be very powerful." Mo secretly said, "You have to call her Aunt Baishan. Although she looks very young, she is actually over 50 years old. Fan and I can be said to have been raised by her." Nanling was amazed when he heard this, and then asked, "What about Boss Fan and I's mother?" Mo said, "Her mother passed away early. At the time, Master Ge Chen had not yet made a fortune. She died with my mother during a mission in the ancient domain. I don't know how Master Ge Chen and Fan and I survived during that period. Anyway, since our family joined the Master's team, it was Aunt Bai who took care of us young people." Nanling felt that the atmosphere was a bit heavy. He really didn't expect that Fan and I and Mo had such a previous relationship. It's just that it's really not good to talk about this kind of thing in this occasion. He said thoughtfully, "Doesn't Fanny want her Aunt Bai to be her mother?" Mo looked at him in surprise and then said with enlightenment, "She didn't say she didn't want to. In short, it's quite awkward. But for us, Aunt Bai has always been a strict mother." Nanling shook her head, and seeing that Brothers Shen and others were quite disappointed, she stood up and said, "Uncle and Aunt, in fact, everyone can have a celebration banquet to celebrate everyone's victory this time, and to celebrate that Li Ji finally took that step successfully." Ge Chen was slightly stunned when he heard this, and then his pupils dilated, obviously thinking of something. Of course he remembered Li Ji. This was a cyborg who was still trusted by his daughter Fanny and could be entrusted with her life when his power was at its lowest point. And if the cyborg takes another step, oh my god, digital life. If it is a super rare existence like digital life, then it really needs to be celebrated. Baishan was also stunned when she heard this, but she felt indescribably weird when she heard Nanling calling her and Ge Chen together. She was shy. Nanling immediately saw the pink emotional aura coming out of her body, and he was extremely sure that what he did was right. After all, he had already experimented with Mo to understand the meaning of this pink aura very clearly. So the banquet started as usual, and a group of people came to Ge Chen's house on Chuxing and started drinking and having fun. This was Nanling's first time to Fanny's house. It was indeed luxurious, but that was it. He didn't care too much about these external things. After drinking 2 cups, he had completely integrated into the Ge Chen group. Well, this was not surprising. After all, he had already known the people in this small group for a long time. They were all good buddies who drank together. So before long, he was there with Xin, Thongshu and others, and began to chat excitedly about things that girls were not interested in. There was a lot of noise over there, but Fanny, Mo and Thongshu were sitting alone at another table, drinking drinks quietly. She looked at Nanling drinking and having fun with her father and others with some entanglement, and couldn't help but say, "Mo, don't you think this is strange?" Mo was in no mood to eat, and looked up at the sky with his hands on his chest, as if he was worried. Hearing this, she asked from the side, "What's strange?" Fanny said, "When we were young, we could only watch them at this table, and now we can only entertain ourselves at this table, but why can Shilon get over there?" Fanny, who was at the children's table, was extremely unhappy. Mo said, "Stop making trouble. Haven't you noticed that when that group of people got together in the past, they always came to tease and make trouble for you? Now that Xionan has blocked all those things, you're unhappy?" Fanny was quiet for a moment, then suddenly her eyes lit up and said, "Ha ha, Mo, look, your father and Xionan are actually on good terms. It seems that he is very satisfied with this son-in-law." Mo said dimly, "They have been on good terms for a long time, do you know? A while ago, when we were in the academy and Xionan was alone at home, he got together with this group of people almost every day." Fanny was amazed when she heard this. She said, "I now feel more and more that Xionan is a natural mastermind." At this time, Zhen was tracking Nanling and talking excitedly about fishing. He was showing off how big a fish he caught. On the other side, Thongqi was drooling and asked, "When will we eat fish again?" Thongqi saw this scene from a distance and said with a sad face, "I'm afraid that one day my father will suddenly ask me to call Nanling uncle." Fanny and Mo both sighed and patted Thongqi's shoulders to comfort him. Mo said, "Those drinkers are really capable of anything. I don't like living at home because my father is often drunk and behaves ugly." When she said this, she was actually glad in her heart. Fortunately, her Xionan did not learn bad things from these drunkards. Every time he drank, he would drink just enough and would not make things difficult for her. What should she do? Now she always feels that she can find how good Nanling is in every aspect of life. What should she do? Chapter 230. Men and women can also be pure. After the party that day, everything seemed to be on track. The people who had troubled them were severely punished, and their most important partner Li Ji finally became a digital life. Everything began to develop in a good way. If they had not had to participate in the Galaxy Fairy trials, Nanling and others would have started to enjoy a peaceful life. The Huxia Corps was supposed to participate in the global competition at night, but unfortunately they were disqualified. Nanling was quite surprised by this, and hurriedly went online to check, only to find that someone had been leading the rhythm on the internet since I didn't know when, and began to discuss whether it was reasonable for the Huxia Corps to participate in two competitions at the same time. Similar discussions actually existed from the beginning, but they suddenly became noisy recently. Then, for some reason, the official did not insist on it this time, and simply disqualified the Huxia Corps from participating. Fanny, who was originally ready to fight hard, was stunned by this result. She was stunned for a long time, and then realized, it must be that little bitch King Fei. She must have used this method to make me unhappy. I didn't expect that the official of Galaxy Fairy guest, which sounds powerful, would be controlled by such a little bitch. It's so boring. Nanling heard her complaints, especially understood the meaning of her complaints, so she said, "To be honest, Uncle Gichen's original plan was to let you qualify for the finals, and then he would take the opportunity to seize the command of the escort fleet. But when I was chatting with Uncle Gichen yesterday, I found that he was very surprised that Aunt Liji became a digital life. He thinks that our team has been completely formed so far, which can make him feel at ease. From the words, it seems that you are not so determined to be the commander of this escort fleet." Fanny's eyes suddenly lit up when she heard this, and she asked in surprise, "What you mean is that Dad allowed me to go out for adventure?" Nanling shook her head and said, "Uncle didn't say that. I think he just feels more relieved about you, but you are his only daughter and his only relative after all, and his attention is all on you." Fanny was a little discouraged and said, "Of course I know. After all, I'm the only daughter of my father. I actually know how much he loves me, but I really can't stand him always controlling me." Nanling said meaningfully, "Then maybe you should find a way to distract his attention." Mo's eyes widened slightly. She had a very subtle premonition, a sense of jadu, as if someone was going to come up with some bad ideas again. Fanny was still unaware. She asked with a bitter face, "How else can he be distracted? I said before that I am the only daughter of my father." Nanling narrowed his eyes, and Mo thought, why did this man become so wretched? At this time, Nanling really felt like a treacherous jester. He said with a smile, "Boss, do you care about the money and property in the family?" Fanny shook her head and said, "I don't care at all. I even want to rely on my Zhuoxia to create my own family business by pioneering." Nanling said again, "If there is such a person who takes away Uncle Yu's attention from you, will you feel uncomfortable?" Fanny said unhappily, "Do you think I'm still a child? If such a thing really happens, I can't wait to be happy." Then she finally understood what Nanling meant, and her expression suddenly became complicated. Fanny suddenly made up her mind, and then stood up to leave. Mo hurriedly asked, "What are you going to do?" Fanny said without turning her head, Let my father marry Aunt Baishan quickly, so that he won't be left alone all the time. This is not good. Then give me a brother or sister quickly, so that he can feel at ease. Mo exclaimed in his heart. Here it comes, the highlight moment of the real mastermind is here. She looked at Nanling and said, "You?" She didn't know how to describe her feelings at the moment. Nanling shrugged and said, "Don't you think that family is awkward? This kind of awkward interpersonal relationship is a taboo in spiritual practice. I'm worrying about my boss's spiritual practice." Mo was speechless. Isn't this worrying too much? Not only did he arrange a stepmother for Fan and I, but he also arranged a brother or sister who was not yet born. But thinking about it carefully, it seems that Nanling didn't say anything. It was all Fan and I's own idea. I can only say that he is worthy at being the black hand behind the scenes. Some people are employees and lackeys on the surface, but they're actually worried about the boss's family. Not only can he put the boss in solitary confinement with just one sentence, but he can also change the family structure of the boss's family. I have never seen such an awesome employee. Mo sighed and said, "I know Fanny. If she really takes that step, her family may really change because of it. Then once she succeeds, I'm afraid she won't care about the Galaxy Fairy anymore. I can see that her passion for this game has long been exhausted. She just keeps motivated to go out and play." Nanling can understand this very well. He said, "Let her do whatever she wants. She is my boss anyway. I will try my best to do whatever she wants." Why did Mo find this so strange? It sounded like a scumbag confessing to another girl in front of his wife. Wait, think about it from another angle. It seems that the doting of an old father on his daughter can also be substituted. In short, it is really a messy interpersonal relationship. Mo said helplessly, "Okay, I will re-sign your contract. The basic salary is 500,000 yuan per year, and bonuses are calculated separately." Nanling immediately became energetic and said, "That's right." So he did so much before just to remind Mo that his contract had not been signed yet. If the money is in place, then he is willing to do anything. He received the contract and signed it quickly. After all, his wife would not cheat him. Then he said with a relaxed voice, "Okay, it's a long night. Should we do something?" Mo immediately felt a little unnatural. She said, "What do you want to do?" She naturally misunderstood. After all, someone first used a powerful reason to get rid of a troublesome guy, and then said a long night. This was too much like Jvu. Nanling said, "How about we feel the nature?" Mo. She felt that she might have found a fake husband. She was not so resistant. This person didn't even know how to push his luck. He was devoted to the Tao and his mind was full of cultivation. How did this kind of person find a wife? Mo was complaining in her heart, but now she could only accept Nanling's invitation. They climbed up the cliff behind the small building together in the middle of the night and sat in meditation in the evening breeze to feel something. Chapter 231. Chapter 230. Neither up nor down. Nanling took Mo to practice. He took her to the top of the cliff and meditated together to understand nature. Because he had tried this before, he was able to enter a state of meditation directly. However, after 2 hours of meditation, he came back to his senses and suddenly found a pair of eyes staring at him. Nanling opened his eyes and looked over, and saw Mo holding her chin and looking at her dimly. He asked in surprise, "Why don't you practice?" Then she noticed that Mo's emotional aura showed that she was not in such a good mood. Nanling laughed dryly and said, "Okay, then why don't you go down and rest first? I will practice for a while." Mo said lightly, "No, I want to practice too." But her emotional aura still showed that she was not in a good mood. Nanling felt a bit painful. He found that when a woman was in a bad mood, he couldn't figure out why she was in a bad mood even if he had this ability. So he thought about it carefully, and suddenly realized, it must be that the weather here is artificially controlled, and you can't feel the natural spiritual power here. Wait a minute, I'll think of a way for you. After the voice fell, he began to ponder. Then he immediately remembered the paper on Fenwanunting. This paper explains the cause of thunder in nature from a very perfect perspective. Therefore, he can now use his wind control technique to control the clouds in the sky nearby and create a microclimate of artificial thunderstorms for Mo. First of all, water vapor is needed. Thunder in nature must first accumulate electric charges in cumulonimbus clouds. He used the warm wind technique to carry the humid and hot water vapor up to the sky, and slowly formed a cumulonimbus cloud over this bay. In this process, the accumulated water vapor carried a large amount of negative charge. Nanling did not rush to let the rain fall, but controlled it to accumulate and accumulate in the sky. The originally clear night sky suddenly darkened, and the air was filled with a stuffy and humid feeling. Mo stood up all of a sudden. She looked up at the rain cloud in the sky and felt the thunder spirit power from nature gradually growing inside. She said, "I seem to really feel it." She just felt unbelievable. What shocked her was the process of this thunder spirit power being born in nature. For her, a cultivator who mainly practices thunder magic, this was nothing short of seeing a miracle. She looked up at Nanling in astonishment, wanting to get an answer from him. But Nanling, who was always like a boy next door, seemed extremely mysterious and cold at this time. He raised his finger to Mo and made a silence gesture in front of his lips, and then floated up into the clouds alone. He felt it was very strange. He didn't feel anything when he used wind and clouds before. He just felt that thunder could be generated by wind. But when he really operated it according to all the theoretical basis of this paper, he realized that if the wind wanted to generate thunder, he had to add some water to it. This was definitely a new perception for him. With such a perception, how could he care about women? This kind of natural understanding, even if it has no effect for the time being, can serve as a foundation for future courageous progress. Mo watched Nanling float directly into the rain cloud, and then found that the rain cloud was full of thunder and lightning, and the thunder spirit power that was only slowly growing suddenly exploded. She suddenly didn't want to stay on the ground anymore, and rushed directly into the sky to look for Nanling's figure, as if she felt uneasy when she couldn't see his figure at this time. She never thought that she would feel dependent on a man. She was a little confused at this time, not knowing how to deal with this kind of cultivation. Then she found Nanling's figure. He was floating in the middle of a thunder cloud, and there was a faint flash of thunder around him. He said, "Sister Mo, carefully feel the birth of thunder and thunder spirit power here. Now you just need to look at it like this, and find that feeling first." Mo was relieved. Nanling was intoxicated with his own wind. He found that wind can play a very important role here, that is, to draw out thunder. He pushed the airflow around him, and his talent of flowing wind allowed him to completely control the surrounding clouds through wind. Then he stretched out his hand and turned it, with him as the center. A slow airflow swirled around, and then the clouds around him slowly rotated. In this process, the clouds were aroused, and countless electric lights began to surge. Some small electric lights appeared one after another, and then there was a low and long muffled sound in the sky, thunder. When the thunder sounded, Mo was shocked on the spot. She slowly entered the state and watched the changes in the sky with Nanling. Thunder spirit power rolled in the sky. At this moment, the whole world was filled with a strong electromagnetic field, connecting the sky and the earth, as if a fierce discharge was about to begin. At this time, Mo's whole body was in this electric field, and her whole body was trembling with excitement. She felt that she was about to see some very beautiful scenes, and she would also comprehend the real thunder. But just when Nanling was ready to make the entire cumulonimbus cloud start to discharge, a demon wind suddenly blew up from the flat ground. The entire cumulonimbus cloud was shattered at once, and the lightning that continued was suddenly affected by another extremely powerful electric field above, and all gathered upward. A thunderstorm was about to come, but it suddenly disappeared. Nanling was so uncomfortable. He was interrupted halfway through his perception, just like stopping halfway through something. Looking at Mo next to him, well, she also had a face full of discomfort, which was good, balanced. Nanling was still uncomfortable. He asked, "What's going on?" Mo took a deep breath and said, "It's the weather control system of Chuxing. It must have discovered the formation of the extreme climate here and then intervened artificially." Nanling wanted to curse. He said helplessly, "This Chuxing is really not suitable for perception." He was uncomfortable. Just when he was about to perceive the key to using wind to attract thunder, it was gone. Mo was also uncomfortable. She had just touched the truth of thunder. This feeling of being neither up nor down was even more uncomfortable, but there was no way to relieve it. She looked at Nanling and said, "Let's not talk about Fana now. I can't wait to leave this planet. It's not suitable for cultivation on this planet." Nanling could only say, "I hope everything goes well with Boss Fana." The two of them were bored at night, and finally went back to their rooms without saying anything more. The next morning, the good news was that Fana came to them with joy and said, "We can set sail again. My father agreed to let me go out." Nanling was quite surprised to hear this. After all, he didn't expect things to go so smoothly. But he also received a bad news, that is, his special flight certificate was indeed revoked. Originally, he thought that this matter had passed, but now it seems that some people who have suffered losses are still unwilling to accept it. But what does it matter? Anyway, they are all leaving, and they don't know when they will come back in the future, so why think so much? I don't know what the person behind the scenes will think when he finds himself facing a situation where no one has left after a lot of operations. Chapter 232. 3 minutes of heat. On this day, Fanny brought her team to the airport outside the Chugive, where they began to rearrange and pack up the zooxia. This airport is very luxurious. Nanling found that it is usually not open to the public, and the ships docked inside are all hunting ships. What is shocking is that Fanny's zooxia is not the largest here, and it seems not to be the best. The hunting ships that look extremely luxurious outside can be seen everywhere here, and Fanny only has one. Nanling felt a little numb. The world of these rich people is really more vast than he imagined. Fanny hummed in dissatisfaction. In fact, more than half of these ships have never sailed. For many people, hunting ships are just a decoration they must have. Mo patted her head and said, "Why think about those things? Zooxia is enough for us." Fanny nodded. "Yes, we're back, and we can set sail again soon." She was very happy and had completely forgotten about the Galaxy Ferry. Originally, it was just a game, and for her, it was at most a channel to achieve her goals. But now Gichen has allowed her to set sail at any time when she is ready, so she is too lazy to play that game that is outdated in her mind. Yes, she is such a bad girl, and she is only interested in interstellar exploration now. Nanling sighed, and also gave up the game of Galaxy Ferry in his heart. He felt that this kind of game is called real data, but because of the stubbornness on the map, there is a sense of disobedience everywhere. Anyway, Nanling has no interest in it for a long time, because he found that this game only needs to wait until everyone is familiar with the routine mode, and in the end it is actually a competition of the quality of the generals. Compete in operation, compete in computing power, and compete in battlefield response. But their actual computing power is still limited to play this game, which is very boring. They simply got busy together on the Zooxia. This ship has not been started for almost 2 years, and it is unknown whether there will be any problems. As the chief mechanic of the ship, Nanling had the responsibility to perform a comprehensive maintenance on it. What surprised him was that Thongshi also had this talent, or that these talents who are trained as adjutants were so versatile. Nanling simply asked him to maintain the weapon system, while he took inventory of the logistics supplies, and Mo checked the electrical control and energy lines of the spacecraft. As for the comprehensive integrated inspection, it was done by Li Ji. While taking inventory of the supplies, Nanling said, "I feel that we can get more robots on the ship. Now that we have Aunt Li Ji, our robots can also become reliable." Mo thought it made sense when she heard it, and she asked, "Sister Li Ji, what is your current computing power?" Li Ji said, "My computing power is very strong now, and it is still getting stronger. It is not a problem to command tens of thousands of robots at the same time. If you can trust me, I can handle the routine maintenance of this ship. This is the staged improvement of digital life." Li Ji's computing power is completely different from the original. Freed from the physical limitations of the human brain, she is now in a stage of rapid progress. Nanling was quite happy, but he thought about it and looked up again and said, "But Aunt Li Ji, I'll find a way to make a body for you. It's not easy to only talk to you through the monitor." Li Ji said, "Don't worry, let me get used to the feeling of being everywhere now." Mo suddenly thought of something and said, "I think it's better to prepare a body for you as soon as possible. There is also a member of my family who has become a digital life." He said that at this stage of becoming a digital life, you must not be too obsessed with this feeling of being everywhere, which will make you lose yourself quickly. You need to have an anchor point in the real world, and then gradually master higher computing power and become stronger. Nanling was quite surprised, but thinking that Mo's Linger family is also a big family, and a big family that is good at controlling lightning, it seems understandable. Fanny's expression was a little unnatural. She sat alone on the bridge and said helplessly, "I wanted to give Sister Li Ji a surprise, but I didn't expect you to say so much. If you don't say it now, I'm afraid you will have to prepare a new body for Sister Li Ji yourself." "Well, actually I have ordered a brand new body for Sister Li Ji, but it hasn't arrived yet." Everyone had a different feeling when they heard it, and they all felt that Fanny seemed to have grown up. Nanling showed a gratified smile. He felt that this was not only Fanny's growth, but also for Li Ji. The more anchor points she had in this world, the further she could go on the road of digital life. Fanny also felt a little embarrassed, and then took the opportunity to announce another thing. "Then we will set sail when Sister Li Ji's new body arrives." Nanling asked in surprise. Set sail now. Don't we need to wait for your family's affairs to be settled? Fanny asked back. What can happen in my family? My father has slept with Aunt Bai, at most I can go and ask my mother to admit it. Nanling. ... Then you were really careless. At this time, Li Ji reminded. Tonight is the semi-finals of the Galaxy Fairy Academy War. I can actually participate. Do you really want to give up? Mo also advised. It's already the semi-finals. Nanling didn't mean to persuade. He had a clear position for himself, that is, the boss's lackey, and he would do whatever the boss told him to do. Fanna said unhappily. I have achieved my purpose of playing Galaxy Fairy, so why waste time on this? If I have that time, I would rather play that Galaxy Past series, at least there I can still use my favorite kinetic weapons. Oh, Boss Fanny also has a hobby, that is, he likes retro-style figures. Nanling scratched his head, and suddenly had an idea and said, why don't we try to use spiritual materials to make some kinetic weapons that can be blessed with spiritual power? Fanny was immediately excited, and quickly opened a list in front of Nanling, and then said, look at the materials here, just tick the ones you want, and I'll buy them. The wealthy dog tycoon is going to use his money again. However, it is obviously normal for a young lady to pay for her personal hobbies. Anyway, even Thongship, who complained the most, didn't say anything about it. He just said, as for kinetic weapons with spiritual power, aren't they available in the ancient domain? Fanna glared at him and said, can those modern styles be compared with those ancient classic styles? Also, those weapons are so expensive. If Jianan can make them, it only costs the cost price, and there is a tenfold difference in price. She actually thought of saving money. In any case, the matter of the Galaxy Fairy guest was really completely forgotten by her. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 233. The daughter who played a dangerous game on her father. Fanny was playing with the parts that Nanling had just made for her, her eyes sparkling, as if they were shining. This is the performance of a person who has encountered something that he likes. She obviously likes these retro figures too much. Of course, corresponding to this, she has completely thrown the matter of Galaxy Shirang to Java. And she probably also had a premonition of what she would encounter, so when she boarded the Eudoxia, she restricted her communication rights. Only those who were allowed could access her communication, and everyone else replied with AI. Especially now that Li Ji controls the system of the Eudoxia, she has built the system of this spacecraft like a copper wall and an iron wall. Suddenly, no one could find this young lady. They only knew that she had withdrawn from the competition very willfully when anyone with a discerning eye could see the advantage. At this time, Nanling paused because he received a communication from Gichen. Are you with Fanny? Nanling felt that this message was strange no matter how he looked at it, and he replied. Our members on the Eudoxia are all packing up the spacecraft. I didn't expect Uncle to be so open-minded. Gichen was silent for a while. For some reason, this silence made people feel depressed. Then the old father said in a very tired tone. Before, you must have given that girl advice, right? Nanling quickly denied it, saying, I just reminded Boss Fanna how important family harmony is. Gichen felt a little bit collapsed and said, then do you know how that damn girl promoted family harmony? Nanling, I don't know. Gichen said, she drugged us. Nanling, good guy, this is too inhuman. He quickly said, this has nothing to do with me. He felt that Gichen was so unlucky to give birth to such a daughter. Gichen said with emotion, this of course has nothing to do with you, I just feel that this girl even did such a thing in order to get out, and there is no way to keep her around. I've also figured it out. I can't always take care of her. When we're out, you and Mo should take care of her more. Mo's steadiness and your resourcefulness are what I trust. At this time, Fanny, who was opposite Nanling, looked over and said strangely, why are you looking at me like that? Did I do anything strange? Nanling's mouth twitched and said, no, I just think you are so awesome. Fanny immediately acted coquettishly to Mo. Mo, look at your husband, he suddenly praised her so much, is there any intention? Nanling's mouth was about to cramp, and she directly sent Gichen's chat records to Mo. Then Mo also twitched her mouth and said, it's okay, I also think you are so awesome. Fanny looked at a loss. At this time, Gichen sent another text in the communication. You have led me astray. Just now, the organizer of the Galaxy Fairy Guest found me specifically and asked why you didn't come to participate. When Nanling heard this, she said, "Oh, Boss Fanny is in a bad mood recently, and she decided to withdraw from the competition." Git Chen was silent again, probably because he was exhausted by his willful daughter. He said, "What's the reason?" Nanling said, "It was 2 days ago. The organizer cancelled our qualification for the selection in the whole region without saying a word, and then Fanny was unhappy." Git Chen pondered for a while and said, "I think this matter should be the little stumbling block caused by King Fei, and your special flight certificate is also. This time she suffered a big loss, and she disgusted you so much in some dispensable places." Nanling was curious after hearing this. What loss did she suffer? Git Chen said, "Her authority was downgraded, which means that she can no longer directly activate the backdoor against other people's intelligence cores like before." Nanling could not understand the severity of this punishment. As if understanding his doubts, Git Chen said again, "To put it another way, there are also high and low status in the real core circle of the Gi family's direct lineage, and the high and low status reflects this level of authority." Nanling understood after hearing this. Does this mean that concubine Yu King is inferior? He said, "Even so, she can still make us feel uncomfortable." Git Chen said, "That's right, even if she loses her authority, she still has her father and grandfather, and there are too many ways for her to achieve influence. Well, since Fanny has decided to leave, she can leave now. Now Mo is already a golden elixir, and Li Ji is a digital life. I'm no longer worried about safety." Nanling immediately thought of the scene when they were madly targeted in hyperspace. To be honest, when they set sail again, the first thing they have to consider is the Death Star pirates. This unfortunate raider fleet has made things difficult for them 3 times in a row. This is a deadly feud. At this time, Git Chen said, "Tell Fanny for me that since she has made all the preparations, let's set sail. The new prosthetic body she ordered is actually not powerful enough. I have upgraded its configuration and completely transformed it into a psychic machine. Your companion can use this prosthesis to try to control spiritual power. It is our family's way of thanking her for her loyalty." Git Chen is an open-minded person, and this family is all open-minded. After Nanling thanked Master Git Chen on behalf of Li Ji, he said to Fan and I, "Aunt Li Ji's new body will arrive tomorrow morning." Fan and I said happily, "Okay, then we will set sail tomorrow. Please tell my father for me to accompany Aunt Bai well, and there is no need to send me off." That free and easy look did not look like someone who had just used a poisonous drug on his father and stepmother. However, can you, as a good family, not use a young man who has nothing to do with you as a mouthpiece? It is really embarrassing to have him inserted between you. Nanling felt that he had borne a burden that he should not have borne, but considering the high salary paid to him by Fan and I's boss, he decided to endure it. A mouthpiece is a mouthpiece. So time passed slowly in the work. Nanling made a retro-style Gauss rifle for Fan and I according to the weapon-making techniques he learned in the Shugyu Academy. She had already gone to shoot with great pleasure. At 8 o'clock the next morning, Li Ji's new prosthesis was also delivered. It was truly an extraordinary prosthesis, with a powerful spiritual furnace on its chest, and all the important parts of its body were also crystal-like structures, showing strong spiritual fluctuations in Nanling's perception. Almost as soon as it was delivered, its eyes suddenly lit up, and then it stood up and kept swinging its limbs. Li Ji's voice came out of its mouth. "It feels good, but it looks a bit strange without simulated skin. By the way, Shonen, I know you like white skin, what about hair color?" Nanling raised his eyebrows and was about to answer, but immediately felt a suffocating breath around him. He turned his head and saw Mosing standing next to him expressionlessly, not saying a word. He immediately stepped back and said, "Just do what you like, don't ask me." Li Ji laughed and said, "Then black hair, don't call me auntie anymore, call me sister." As she said that, she excitedly dragged the cargo box of the prosthesis to the corner with one hand, looking like she was ready to pinch her face. But even so, Li Ji's voice was heard in the communication broadcast of the entire Zhuoxia. "Attention, crew members, we're expected to set sail at 8:30, please be ready to set sail." Thongchi looked sad because he had to give up his studies and run away with Fan. At this time, Fanny, Nanling, Mo and Thongchi applied for the operation of retaining their student status together, and they didn't know if they would have the opportunity to come back to complete their studies next time. And it was in this situation that a spaceship flew from Chuxing, and just after it docked, a girl hurried over. It turned out to be concubine Yu King. She shouted loudly beside the Zhuoxia hunting ship, "Fanny, you coward, are you going to run away? Her expression seemed to be very bad, full of anger and grievance. Chapter 234 Who is the real Miss? Fanny appeared at the door of Eudoxia with a proud look on her face. She leaned against the door with her arms folded across her chest, looking at Miss Kingfay who was in front of her with both resentment and grievance. She smacked her lips, feeling a little bland. At this time, Nan Ling beside her had handed her a glass of her favorite juice. Fanny reached out to take the glass of juice, looking at Nan Ling's eyes with great satisfaction. She sipped the juice elegantly, as if she was tasting a glass of expensive wine. Then she said, "Why did you come to my place? I didn't provoke you, did I?" Concubine Yu King glared at Fanny and said angrily, "Why did you give up?" Fanny asked back with a smile, "It was the official who didn't allow me to go, how could it be me who gave up?" Concubine Yu King pointed at Fanny and said, "I was talking about the selection competition of Chugyu Academy. You can obviously participate in this selection competition." Fanny asked back with a cold face, "Why do you say I gave up?" Concubine Yu King was stunned for a moment. She bit her teeth lightly and said, "Even if you lost a member, it's only one." Fanny snorted coldly and said, "I just think this is just your game after all. There is no need to lose your ambition." She said lightly, "It's just a game. As a daughter of the Gyu family, I don't want to participate. What can it do to me? Do you want me to kowtow to it and apologize? Oh, well, let him come, I'll kill him. This eldest lady has a violent temper, it really comes out when she says it." Nan Ling looked at Fanny's cool response, and she liked it in her heart. After all, this kind of iron-headed kid can really handle things. However, from the performance of Gyu Kingfei, it is enough to analyze some things. Fanny's withdrawal obviously caused some very bad effects, which have caused dissatisfaction among the forces behind the Galaxy Fairy. And these dissatisfactions can even affect the top leaders of the Gyu family, causing them to put pressure on Gyu Kingfei. Otherwise, how could this arrogant young lady be willing to bow down in front of Fanny, her enemy? Gyu Kingfei was furious when she heard this. She didn't expect Fanny to be so stubborn. She felt very aggrieved. Because according to the elders in the family, she must make Fanny change her mind, even if she had to lose face and apologize. But this did not happen, because Aura suddenly gathered not far from Gyu Kingfei, and then a tall and thin figure appeared. This man was dressed in a proper gentleman's suit. He bowed slightly to Fanny and said, "Hello, dear Miss Gyu Fanny. I am Fox, the operating director of Galaxy Fairy Guest in the Ancient Domain. We were wrong in the previous matter. Please forgive us, Miss Fanny." Fanny looked at him with a surprised look and said, "Hello, Mr. Fox, you don't have to apologize to me. You didn't do anything wrong." Gyu Kingfei clenched her fist when she heard this. She felt that Fanny really wanted to kill her. But she had no choice, because she realized at this time that she had no way to resist the family. At this time, she clenched her fists and clenched her teeth tightly. Finally, she squeezed out a sound from her teeth. "I'm sorry," but Fanny had already said frankly and cheerfully, "No one is wrong in this matter. I just don't like playing this game anymore." Chairman Fox was stunned. He didn't expect that he would get such an answer. He looked at Fanny in surprise and asked, "Miss Fanny, are you not interested in the rewards of this competition?" Fanny said politely but elegantly, "Well, I'm not interested." The people of Fox were also annoyed. It was really difficult to deal with such a young lady who was indifferent and had no desires. He said, "Miss Fanny, let me tell you the truth. The tactics and personal abilities of your Eudoxia Corps are extremely strong. They have received great attention and praise from our headquarters. If you don't participate in the competition, it will be a great loss for this competition." His tone was very respectful and humble, which could be said to give Fanny enough face. However, Fanny seemed to have little interest in this. She asked back, "What will you do if I don't participate?" Fox was stagnant at the time. However, before he could say anything, Fanny had already said, "What will you make me lose?" "I'll put pressure on the Gyu family to deal with my father." "Oh," Fanny's eyes flashed with brilliance. "Or do you plan to send a fleet to intercept me when I travel?" What's going on when she was talking about it? Fox thought that this girl was not normal, right? Would a normal person feel happy at this time? Well, no matter how abnormal it was, he admitted it. He said, "Then Miss Fanny, if I can offer some conditions that you can't refuse, are you willing to come back?" Fanny said, "I don't even know what I lack, how do you know?" Fox hated these children of the family. He felt that compared to the concubine Gyu King who could be easily controlled by him, this Gyu Fanny was the real Miss Gyu. Too difficult to serve. He thought for a while, and then said, I can take out an essence soul experience. Maybe Miss Fanny doesn't need it, but your father, Master Gychen, must need it, right? This really took Fanny's hand. She herself didn't think of this aspect. But it was really very useful for Gychen. Everyone who heard this was shocked. They didn't expect that the Galaxy Fairy would come up with such a big benefit. However, at this time, Nanling received a text communication from Gychen. Don't let Fanny agree to him. Your theory has brought me a lot of inspiration and let me see the way forward. The so-called essence soul experience is unnecessary. Don't forget, our ancestors were also immortals. Nanling. It seems that you have been paying attention to this place. At this time, Gychen said. Your cultivation theory is wonderful, and it seems to have formed its own system. It is really amazing. We, father and daughter, have also benefited from you. The return will not disappoint you. Nanling's eyes lit up at the time. He had no objection to leaking his cultivation theory to Gychen. After all, he felt that it was too lonely and insecure to explore this field alone. Let Gychen, who was close to the nascent soul, go ahead and try it out, so that he can follow the map. It would be great if there were extra games. So he said a few polite words to show his courtesy, and then when Fanny hesitated, he slipped past Fanny with a gust of wind escape, and then appeared between Fanny and Narfus and said, Are you annoying? My young lady just didn't feel comfortable to chase you away. My master is such a wise and powerful man, does he still need you to provide me an essence soul experience? If you can provide the experience of becoming an immortal, it's fine, but we have to weigh the advantages of such things compared to the experience of the immortals of our ancestors. There is no such thing as the experience of the immortals, but this does not stop him from talking nonsense. Anyway, the attitude of a lackey has been shown enough, because Fanny and her daughter gave too much. P.S. I'm adapting to the work. I will try to add more chapters after I get familiar with the new job and work environment. Chapter 235 The Truth Torn. A fake young lady, no matter how glamorous she is in front of others, no matter how domineering her family is, once she meets someone powerful outside, her true colors will be exposed and she can only behave herself. A real young lady may not care about her appearance on weekdays, but she can act domineeringly and willfully in front of anyone, and people have to be careful to accompany her. Yes, do you think my father will need the essence soul experience you gave me? Do you think I will need it? That experience is just the way of others. My father and I will go our own way. What does it have to do with others? What's more, we cultivators have our own experiences along the way. How can we deny the so-called successful experience of others? It's better not to look at it, so as not to confuse ourselves. Nanling almost clapped his hands and cheered, and he really clapped his hands and cheered. The young lady said it well. Without such a character, how can you walk steadily on the path of cultivation? The words made sense, but his expression at this time looked like a bootlicker, a complete treacherous villain and a person seeking favor. To be honest, if Nanling is really seeking favor from a flatterer, then the threshold for this flatterer is too high now. Not only does he have to sort out the interpersonal relationships in the boss's family, but he also has to worry about the boss's cultivation. Under these premises, the most important thing is to protect the boss's smile. It's difficult, it's really too difficult. When Mosorfana suddenly figured out something and was radiant, she had an extremely strange feeling in her heart. Why did it seem that her husband had always been used by someone else? It was very subtle. As Fanny's follower, she couldn't say anything, and she had to sigh that Nanling's service skills were good. It was very annoying. Listening to Fanny's proud words, Narfus was speechless all of a sudden. He found that this girl was really stubborn. He sighed and said, Miss Fanny, I have never seen a lady as noble as you. Well, it seems that I can't convince you, but please leave your contact information. Maybe we can find a solution that satisfies everyone later. Translation means, I have never seen such a difficult guy. Fanny was a little impatient when she heard this. She said, I really don't understand why you are so persistent. Don't forget that you are making a game. As long as the game is fun, I will come back on my own without you asking me. But now I think your game is not fun anymore. This is the key. It has nothing to do with what you can give me. Fox was stunned. He looked at Fanny's pure eyes and expression, and felt his heart touched. He shook his head and sighed, yeah, it's just such a simple question, why didn't I figure it out? In fact, it is possible that the game content of Galaxy Fairy will be short-lived, but it can maintain such a high popularity only because of a large amount of publicity resources. Perhaps we should return it to the essence of the game. He paused and said, I have a test version of Galaxy Fairy here. I wonder if Miss Fanny is interested in doing a test for us. Fanny's eyes lit up when she heard it. She laughed and said, if that's the case, we can try it when we enter hyperspace flight. You also know that hyperspace flight is very boring. I have a lot of time to waste. I have to find something interesting to do, right? Fox's eyes lit up and he quickly said, that's right, then please correct me when you have time, Miss Fanny. As he said that, he bent down, and then the body formed by the energy gathered collapsed again. Fanny shook her head in boredom and said to Nanling, Xiao Nan, let's go. Nanling said oh and followed. At this moment, Concubine Yu King suddenly said, wait. Fanny didn't even look at her or pay any attention. Concubine Yu King shouted, Fanny, stop right there. Nanling immediately stepped forward to block Concubine Yu King's sight, and said coldly, the young lady doesn't want to see you, please stop. Concubine Yu King said angrily, get out of the way, you dog slave. Don't block my way. Nanling was not angry either, he was just a lackey who was paid to do things. He just said playfully, do you really think you were a young lady? A young lady who can't even decide her own fate? Believe it or not, as long as I cultivate to the nascent soul stage and come to tell your family will dress you up beautifully and send you to me to do whatever I want. Oh, you are not convinced? There is nothing to be dissatisfied with, you are just your gift that has been carefully packaged and can be given away at any time. Nanling said these heartbreaking words with an evil smile, and then turned around and walked back to the hatch of the Zhuoxia. Concubine Yu King was so angry that she trembled all over, and she felt a great humiliation. But what followed the humiliation was a strong sense of panic. If she had not felt this way before, she might not have felt this way, but what she had just experienced made her clearly know that Nanling was right in at least one thing. She could not decide her own fate. Whoosh, Fanny's voice came from the hatch of Zhuoxia. Good little Nan, it's not enough for you to have Mo, you also want to take this little bitch into your room. It's not her turn. At this time, a cold voice sounded. What's the turn? Fanny. Ahem, it's nothing, I was just making an analogy, you have to keep an eye on your man, this guy is very cunning. The voice disappeared because the hatch closed. Yu King Fei was absent-minded for a while, and she was suddenly filled with another feeling when she looked at the Zhuoxia. She suddenly wanted to board such a spaceship and sail with it. She looked around quickly, and suddenly saw a larger and more gorgeous hunting ship next to her, and then ran over with a hint of expectation in her expression. When she arrived at the hatch of the hunting ship, an AI immediately came in and said, welcome, Miss King Fei. Yu King Fei's mood suddenly became cheerful. She struggled into it and then came to the bridge. Prepared for takeoff, she said. Of course, she knew that she couldn't leave, but she couldn't help wanting to have a try while sitting in the captain's seat. However, a basin of cold water was poured on her head. I'm sorry, Miss King Fei, you are not authorized to start the spacecraft. She fell silent for a moment. Suddenly, the spacecraft shook slightly. She said, open the bridge armor. The bridge armor fell immediately, and she watched Fanny's Zhuoxia slowly take off, and then left the airport without any hindrance and headed for the boundless starry sky. Her eyes showed envy and yearning. She had never felt this way before. She just felt that everyone liked her, and then she became arrogant because of her favor. But now she realized that she was a canary locked in a cage, and if her master loved her, she could do anything, but if her master gave her away, she suddenly remembered Nanling's evil smile, and she shuddered. She hated Nanling because he had torn off the truth and exposed it to her, which was cruel and brutal, and made her feel suffocated. Chapter 236 Target Determination. The Zhuoxia set sail again. After a long fight with Yu King Fei, Fanny was refreshed. She sat down in the captain's seat and began to recall the past with a smile. Then she frowned and muttered, no, Thongqi was too young. He thought his young lady had made some serious discoveries, so he quickly bowed and asked, Miss Fanny, is there anything wrong? Fanny looked at him blankly and said, I think I could have said something more powerful just now, which would have been more satisfying, what a pity. Thongqi. He felt very embarrassed all of a sudden. Why did he come to join in the fun? Mo couldn't bear to see her friends in the same circle being embarrassed. She stepped forward and rubbed Fanny's red hair and said, focus, we have already set sail, but you, the captain, haven't designated our course yet. Fanny. She had a confused expression on her face, as if asking, there is actually such a question? Very good, something unreliable happened again. Nanling felt that as soon as she got on the ship, Fanny's unreliable attribute increased sharply. Come to think of it, no matter how she acted on Chuxing, Yu Chen would cover her up, so it was generally controllable. But now she's out of control, and the problem is serious. Originally, it was just Mo who could barely suppress her and become her driver. But now there is Nanling himself, and he and Mo working together should be able to greatly reduce Fanny's unreliable attribute. Nanling smiled and said, "It's not urgent to make a decision now. We are pioneering, and pioneering is to explore strange things in the unknown." Fanny nodded repeatedly after hearing this, and she felt that it had to be Nanling, who spoke very nicely and always touched her heart. She said, "Okay, we can determine the goal now. What suggestions do you have?" Mo is not good at making decisions, so at this time, as the person who asked the question, she fell silent. Thongchi was a little scared by the embarrassment just now, and didn't speak for a while. Nanling saw that it was going to be a cold scene, which was not good. So he made a suggestion. "I have a suggestion." Fanny nodded repeatedly, urging him to speak quickly. He said, "When we parted, we were originally planning to go to Tianzhangxing, the Holy Land of Pioneers. Perhaps we can continue the unfinished journey last time." Fanny suddenly remembered, and she pondered and said, "That's a good idea, but I don't have the interest at the time now." "Well, it can be used as a backup. Do you have any other ideas?" Nanling. He knew that Fanny was a person with no perseverance. She was able to always like pioneering because she liked the feeling of freedom, right? Fortunately, he had prepared for it, and said, "We can also go to the Star Federation." Fanny asked hesitantly, "Why are we going there?" Nanling said, "Because the finals of the Galaxy Fairy will be held there, and it will definitely be very lively there at the time." Fanny's eyes lit up when she heard it, and she muttered, "This is a good idea. I heard that the Star Federation has the most tricks." Seeing this, Thongchi couldn't help but mutter something in a low voice. Mo heard it a little vaguely beside him, but he could still understand that it should be a word like fawning on the superiors and treacherous ministers. She glanced at Thongchi, shook her head and said nothing. Well, she was a little disappointed with Nanling's lackey-like appearance. To be honest, Thongchi was a little pitiful. This carefully trained upper-class elite was at the bottom of the Zhuoxia, which was hard to believe. But it was true. He was at the 8th level of foundation building, and naturally he was stuck at the bottleneck of the 8th to 9th level and had not made a breakthrough. Therefore, his cultivation was not far behind Nanling, who was at the 7th level. In terms of function, Mo and Nanling were more versatile than him, and Li Ji, who was originally at the bottom, was now a magical digital life. To be honest, being on the Zhuoxia really made him feel a sense of inferiority that he had never felt before. At this time, Fanny had already set her goal as the Star Federation, but not long after, she rejected it herself and said, "The Star Federation is too far away. If we go there, we will spend almost a year on the road. This is too boring." Very good, she was not happy again. Nanling racked his brains. Suddenly he thought of something and sent a message to Gichen. "Uncle, is there anything suitable for us to do? We need a place that is close and interesting." Gichen. He actually sent a string of ellipses, and no one knew what it meant. But the next moment, Li Ji said with some surprise, "Fanny, your father sent a list of information." Fanny was diverted and asked, "What is that?" Li Ji sorted out the information, and then projected it between everyone and said, "They are all information about colonies and space stations." "Oh, it's the assets that Gichuan was deprived of. It seems that these assets have been registered under your family's name." "Yes, this is the explanation and compensation from the top of the Gi family to your family. The taxes collected from these places alone are an incredible income every year." Fanny frowned and said, "But why did Dad send these things to us?" Nanling secretly complained about how lazy Gichen was, and said with a smile, "Boss, this is Uncle asking you for help." Fanny cheered up and said, "What do you mean?" Nanling said, "Think about it, Uncle trusts brothers and the others, right?" Cough cough cough, Mo coughed repeatedly, indicating that you should stop talking. Nanling looked over and said, "What's wrong? Is there something wrong with him?" Mo pulled the corner of his mouth and said, "He is my elder." Nanling said indifferently, "What's the matter? We interstellar children are not so hypocritical. Let's just talk about our own things. Isn't Brother Thongshi also treating me like a brother?" I don't think Thongshi is embarrassed. Thongshi lowered his head. He was so embarrassed that he could dig out a 3-bedroom and 1 living room with his toes. "Okay." Nanling waved his hand and said, "So don't think too much, and now we have left Xuxing and can't meet them." Fanny covered her mouth. Cuckoo. Nanling sensed the emotions of each person. Fanny was happy, Mo and Thongshi were embarrassed. He was a little confused, and when he thought about it, Xin, who was calling him a brother all day, didn't seem to be abnormal. But he knew that this topic might not be a good one. So he immediately returned to the original topic and said, let's get back to the point. Uncle only has those people around him, but this time he has acquired too many industries. I'm afraid it will be difficult to really take over. Fanny finally understood and said, yes, this is to ask us to help inspect these industries. Dad is really something. What's there to be embarrassed about? Nanling looked at her dimly. This girl must have forgotten how much she had done. Normal people wouldn't want to talk to you for a while when they encounter such a thing. However, the next target of Zhuoxia was also found, which was a colony that originally belonged to Gyuchuan. Because the account of this colony was negative, Gyuchuan had to invest huge amounts in it every year without any output, but he didn't know why. This became their current short-term goal. Chapter 237 Another Big O-Use Colony Code. Qingchuan. The naming of this star system is very interesting, because it is located in a blue spiral nebula. It is the second star system formed in this nebula according to the chronological scale, so it is named Qingchuan. The name of the colony star is called Qingchuan 2, which means the second planet in this star system. To be honest, this name is a bit Japanese. Zhuoxia left the hyperspace flight within the gravitational range of Qingchuan, and then came to the outside of the planet. There is not even an airport. It seems that there is really no output here. Fanna muttered. A planet without an airport means that there will be no bulk goods entering and leaving the planet, which basically means poor. Mo stood behind Fanny with his hands behind his back and said, the colony on Qingchuan is operating normally. This time we don't need to travel with a landing module. We just need to use gravity to project it down. Li Ji said, I'll stay on the ship this time to provide rear support. Fanny nodded and said, okay, then Mo and I will go down and take a look first. Shonen, she glanced at Nanling and asked, what do you say? Nanling shook her head and said, I want to take inventory, and then I have some ideas to do. If you encounter trouble or need anything, just call me. Fanny nodded and said nothing, then looked at Thongxi and asked, what about you? Thongxi immediately said, my mission is to help the young lady solve problems. As he said that, he also glanced at Nanling, as if to say, who doesn't want to be a lackey? Very good, he finally found the direction and object of competition. Nanling. He couldn't understand, what was there to fight for? The three of them put on combat armor and wingsuits, and then launched from the gravity projection device. They would be launched directly into the atmosphere and then fly in wingsuits. When human civilization has developed to the current level, the vastness of a planet can actually be covered by a scanner for an individual. Nanling watched them leave and ran to his workshop to work. He really had an idea. This ship has also undergone some internal space transformation, and the living area belonging to the crew has been reduced a lot. Obviously, the previous experience made Fanna realize that the crew really doesn't need so many. Now these places have been converted into cargo holds, and now there are 21 large cargo holds on this ship, all of which have huge folding spaces. These cargo holds have been filled to the brim, fully demonstrating the concern and love of Gichen, an old father, for his daughter. He was afraid that his precious daughter would be hungry outside. At this time, Li Ji's exquisite psychic prosthesis came to his side. This prosthesis seemed very light, and there was no sound of footsteps. He lowered his head to check the supplies in the warehouse and said, Aunt Li Ji, why are you here? Li Ji said unhappily, I told you a long time ago that you should call me Sister Li Ji from now on. Did you hear me? Nanling looked up unexpectedly, only to see that Li Ji's face was actually pinched to look like his face. Coupled with her mature charm from her own soul, she actually looked like Nanling's sister. Nanling was speechless for a moment. He was a little worried that Rose's mother would tear it down after seeing this. Then he said, okay, Sister Li Ji. He didn't object. Li Ji sat down beside him and asked, aren't you going to see your warehouse? Nanling asked unexpectedly, my warehouse? Li Ji nodded and said, there is a warehouse that is signed and belongs to you. I checked the time and it was moved up half a month ago. Nanling immediately thought of Gichen, and then further thought that it seemed that he had shared the key of the concept of self-existence in practice with Fanina half a month ago. Master Gichen is very open-minded. He rushed back to his room with full of expectations, looking at the warehouse that occupied half of the room and laughing. Hurry up and see what's inside. I can't see what's inside without your authorization. Li Ji urged. Nanling asked unexpectedly. But Sister Li Ji, this kind of thing won't be difficult for you, right? Li Ji said. This is your stuff. How can I open it and look at it casually without your permission? Unexpectedly principled. Nanling found that after becoming a digital life, Li Ji gradually seemed to be restraining herself with a very high moral standard. He didn't think much and opened the warehouse to check. My goodness, this warehouse is full of various spiritual materials, and the total value is probably no less than 1 billion. This is definitely a sky-high price for Nanling. 1 billion worth of spiritual materials. Nanling scratched his head and his mind burst into many inspirations in an instant. Then the first thing he thought of was consumption. He now has 5 million in savings, so he simply connected to the spacecraft network and bought all kinds of spiritual weapon formulas in one go. A prompt popped up in the middle. Your deposit balance is insufficient. Nanling thought to himself that he was now a person with 1 billion in money, so why would he care about such a small amount of money? So he said cheerfully, I owe it. He succeeded. The Euxia spacecraft system actually had O function. After spending, the enthusiasm faded, and he came to his senses and figured out something was wrong. First, he looked at his account, a shocking naught. Then he looked at his creditors. My goodness, he already owed more than 10 million. Indeed, this is not worth mentioning compared to 1 billion, but the problem is that this 1 billion has been exchanged for physical objects instead of cash. At this moment, most cold voice came from the public channel of Euxia. Let us thank Mr. Nanling for contributing another 9 million funds to the operation of our Euxia Adventure Group. She seemed angry. Was it because Nanling was too wasteful? However, Nanling was just shaking in his heart when he found that there was another 50,000 inches his account, and then Mo sent a private message. I really can't do anything about you. You spend money recklessly when I'm not with you. Fortunately, this is on the Euxia. It doesn't matter how much you spend, but you can't do this again when you go out, okay? Nanling hurriedly. Okay. He felt relieved. Mo still loved him. Li Ji was about to die of laughter. She said, you guys are so funny, it's really fun to stay with you. You know what? I almost fell into despair before. I just felt that life had lost its meaning after losing human perception. Fortunately, I thought about the many fun things that happened to you, so I barely woke up. Nanling said angrily. Didn't we call you back with our true feelings? Li Ji turned her head and said disapprovingly. How can you be so amazing? Nanling glanced at Li Ji and found that her emotional aura was a feeling of peace and tranquility. He couldn't help but sigh. Speaking of which, we have also come out of the bottom, and no one is left behind. It's great. Chapter 238 The Break Path of Civilization. We are not left behind. Nanling said with joy. Li Ji hesitated slightly, then said calmly. Fortunately we came out, otherwise we would really be eliminated by this era. Nanling was surprised that he found that Li Ji's thoughts seemed to be quite profound. So he asked, do you think that people in the lower class area are all eliminated? Li Ji nodded and said, you and I are people who have come this far, don't you have this feeling? Take Chinyuan 06 as an example. In fact, the residents of the middle class area are the real lower class. They are running around for a living and trying to adapt to the changes of the current era. If they are lucky enough, they can accumulate good resources to let their children move up the social class. If they unfortunately lose their jobs, then they are eliminated. Nanling looked at Li Ji without saying anything, but in fact, his eyes conveyed an emotion of disapproval. Li Ji understood what he meant, and she said, you think that I shouldn't say that because we are an example, right? But you have to think about it. Apart from us, what is the proportion of people who can walk out of the lower area? 1 in 10,000? 1 in 100,000? Or 1 in a million? Nanling was speechless, because he felt that 1 in a million should be an exaggeration, but it is not necessarily true that only 1 in 100,000 people could walk out. Li Ji said, don't they have a chance? Look at how many people were recruited on the Euxia. Those hundreds of people faced the same opportunity. But how many of them succeeded in the end? Apart from you and me, there is old Mu, whose life and death is unknown in Chinyuan 06. And if they want to move forward, the first thing they have to do is to undergo super brain transformation. Nanling suddenly understood when he heard this, and he said, the primitive human brain can no longer withstand the development needs of the current era. Li Ji nodded and said, those cheap built-in chips can't meet the needs either, so there are only two ways for ordinary people now. Either buy an expensive 3-piece set and gamble on your own cultivation talent, or undergo a relatively cheap super brain transformation, and then continue to move forward on the path of digital life. Nanling said in astonishment, Sister Li Ji, what's wrong with you? Why do you seem to have experienced a lot all of a sudden? Li Ji laughed when she heard this and said, forget it, I'm too nosy. It may be because the computing power has increased suddenly recently, and I curiously collected many people's personal information on the internet. I looked at 10 billion pieces of personal information and found that these 10 billion people basically took these two paths. For example, people from the lower class district of Chenyuan 06 don't even have the qualifications to be included in this household registration file. Good guy. Nanling realized one thing, that is, Li Ji secretly hacked into the household registration file of the ancient domain. The power that a digital life can exert on the internet is too strong. Since this is the result of such big data, Nanling couldn't help but feel shocked. He asked, what percentage of them are cultivators? Li Ji said, among this household, only 30% are cultivators, and among these 30%, only 1 in 100,000 can surpass the foundation building stage and enter the next realm. I don't know what the proportion of these golden elixirs that can enter the nascent soul stage is, but I estimate that the probability will not exceed 1 in 10,000. Nanling sighed, the path of cultivation is so difficult. Even if the three-piece set and various external aids make the early cultivation easier, it is still a challenge to choose 1 in 10,000 in the end. So it seems that the input and output of the cultivation route are obviously not equal, but why do the human leaders seem to be intentionally promoting the cultivator route? Nanling frowned, and he suddenly had an idea. He looked at Li Ji in astonishment and asked, it feels like those high-level people are consciously preventing everyone from undergoing super brain transformation. Li Ji sighed and said, it seems that you noticed it. I was also surprised after becoming a digital life. The path of cultivators is like a brake pad of human civilization, which is preventing human civilization from completely deviating in a certain direction. Nanling suddenly came to his senses and said, the path of cultivation is preventing mankind from entering the era of universal superbrainization. Li Ji nodded and said, to be more precise, it is preventing human civilization from entering the era of true digital life. If everyone is super-brained, does that mean that they can actually upload their consciousness to the internet collectively? Then it will be a whole new world. A world without flesh and blood creatures, only digital consciousness. Nanling shuddered suddenly and blurted out, silicon-based civilization. He looked at Li Ji with a complicated expression, and asked with a sad feeling, Sister Li Ji, are you still you? Li Ji, who had become a digital life, nodded firmly and said, of course I am still me. Don't forget that I was able to wake up with you as my anchor in this world. I just suddenly increased my computing power and was exposed to too much new knowledge and new perspectives. Looking at Li Ji, who suddenly became knowledgeable and wise, Nanling really felt extremely uncomfortable. Then Li Ji said, but you don't have to worry. The most important thing for the path of a cultivator to become this brake pad is that as the realm of a cultivator is improved, his thinking ability and creativity are obviously better than digital life. Just like you often do things that I can't think of even if I have a huge database. Nanling was happy to hear this. In this case, he decided to do something more unexpected. That is, he felt that his whaling wingsuit was a bit too ordinary, and it was completely incompatible with the high-end feeling of the current pure color faith. In addition, he is now studying the flaming technique and is looking for an excellent external spiritual power source to assist. Finally, considering his own talent, he suddenly had a very bold idea. He said, Sister Li Ji, I need your help. Li Ji smiled and said, of course I will help you. Inspiration burst out in Nanling's mind, and he shared his ideas bit by bit, and Li Ji was also slightly moved after listening. She said, you are going to do a big project. Don't worry. Leave the mechanical part to me. I will definitely polish the design of the mechanical part to perfection. As for how to integrate the spiritual pattern, it depends on you. Nanling couldn't wait to start. While selecting the spiritual materials in the entire warehouse, he said, don't worry. I have already planned the spiritual pattern. It doesn't need to be so complicated. Now, let's complete the most important thing first. I need a spiritual furnace with fire attribute. He got busy. Unconsciously, the essence entered his brain, allowing his brain to enter a high-speed thinking state. Li Ji was right. The thinking ability of practitioners is not worse than that of digital life. Anyway, after Nanling entered the state, his working ability is simply terrifying. At the same time, Fanny and the other two began to contact the governor of this colony on King Xuanyo to understand the role of this human colony on this planet. Wherever there is a human colony, there are always some special features. Either it is a scientific and technological colony to study some special phenomena, or there are special resources that need to be collected. But Fanny and the others were very confused, because this planet was marked as a technological colony, but why were the employees here only conducting some routine observation work without any research work being carried out? Chapter 239. Fire Wind Flying Sword. The spiritual light of the flame kept beating in Nanling's hands, and the scorching breath gathered into a heat wave that washed over his body, making him sweat all over. This fire spiritual power was too strong. Although it was all gathered by him, he was not familiar with it after all. He held in his hands that fire attribute spiritual furnace he made. This spiritual furnace was now releasing powerful light and heat like a fireball. This energy release was abnormal, and it was also because the final assembly stage required such a complete release of energy in order to complete all the work in the subsequent component docking. In front of Nanling was Li Ji's new prosthesis. She held in her hands a mechanical giant sword that was about 30 centimeters wide and 2 meters long. This giant sword was also releasing a majestic fire attribute spiritual power. Because Nanling had already drawn the fire-gathering spiritual pattern on this giant sword, it was gathering the surrounding fire attribute spiritual power in an endless stream. At this time, Nanling was carefully installing the small sun-like spiritual furnace into the circular hole between the hilt and the sword guard of the giant sword. This sword is really big. The entire sword lattice is bigger than Nanling's head. There is no way around it, because it is filled with precision machinery. After Nanling put the spirit furnace into the sword lattice, he began to quickly debug this sword. This debugging process was very fast, because Li Ji had already done almost everything that needed to be done, and by the way, she also loaded a very strict firewall for Nanling's mechanical giant sword. At least, no one who is not a digital life has the qualifications to try to crack this firewall. Nanling looked at his masterpiece with satisfaction, thinking that this would not waste all his talents. He stretched out his hand to hold the giant sword, and the intelligence core had already connected to its system. He thought about it and named this system Fire Wind Flying Sword. Well, he was going to use it as a flying sword, which was absolutely awesome. As for now, he stretched out his hand and waved it. Sure enough, the giant sword at more than 2 meters was still too exaggerated, and it was very difficult to dance with. But so what, anyway? His close combat weapon was the collapsed spirit spear. So how exactly is this fire wind flying sword used? He let go of his hands, and suddenly changed his fingers. The fire spirit power in the fire wing flying sword was mobilized to a great extent, and then gathered between his 2 fingers, becoming a fire technique. Burning arrow. A rocket shot out and hit the target in front, destroying it directly in a violent explosion. Nanling laughed, very satisfied with this. He shook his head, and then installed a temporary wisdom core on the fire wing flying sword. This wisdom core will be used as a prop for him to assist in controlling this mechanical giant sword. He needs that fire control technique in the wisdom core to assist in controlling the spirit power in the giant sword. The only bad thing is that this is the first time he has made a wisdom core, and his hands are still relatively new, so the wisdom core he made this time is only equivalent to the fire control technique of LV3, which is somewhat different from his own fire control technique that has reached LV5. That's right, his fire control skill is already level 5. Talent is talent, it's written into his genes. Even if his body can't have 2 spiritual powers at the same time, he has reached this level because of long-term control and use. By the way, he also has level 4 lightning control skill. This is not a bonus of bloodline of talent, it is all he slowly comprehended from the principle of controlling lightning with wind and then achieved. In the future, his lightning control skill may even have a higher upper limit, because the relationship between wind and lightning is obviously closer. As long as he continues to dig deep into the inspiration brought to him by the spell of wind rolling clouds, then he may really be able to use wind to create lightning one day. Of course, it was too early to say anything. Just as he was busy preparing to further test the fire wing flying sword, Li Ji suddenly reminded him. I think you have to pay attention to the situation on the ground. Nanling asked in surprise. What's wrong? Li Ji said. Your wife and dear boss are experiencing a rebellion now. They have been driven out of the colony by the rebels and are currently resting in the wild. Redstone was ignored, which was good. It showed that as a digital life, Li Ji at least had a basic desire for revenge. Nanling said in surprise. How is this possible? How can there be a force in the colony to restrict them? Li Ji said. At first they were just checking the situation of this colony. I also have synchronized data imported here. You will know after you take a look. Nanling immediately read the information from the intelligence core, and then the high-speed brain instantly came to a conclusion. This colony is just a cover. The problem was clear at a glance. Because this colony established in the name of scientific research did not have any scientific research output at all, and all the output information it had was some weather observation data, biological information samples, and geological change information. Do you need to arrange for the staff of the colony to handle this kind of data? It only needs a scanning device, or at most an AI robot, to complete it. But this colony applied for a large amount of funds in this name to maintain its operation. There must be something wrong here, he asked. Did they discover the problem of the colony, so they caused the rebellion in the colony? Li Ji said. On the surface, that's the case. Nanling said. That's not right. How could such a rebellion affect them? Fanny, Mo, Thongship, anyone can suppress this rebellion. However, Li Ji played the next picture. It was a picture of the rebellion taken from the sky. It turned out that Fanny and the others were driven out of the colony by the rebels. They seemed to be afraid of the consequences and did not dare to really exert their strength. Nanling asked curiously, what's going on? He asked the action team directly. Fanny said angrily, Mo, you tell me. Mo sighed and said, they are too shameless. They actually used a group of women and children to take up weapons to attack us. This makes us a little afraid to act rashly. We can only withdraw first. Nanling was surprised to hear this. Did these three forget their identity as monks? If they were monks, they should not be suppressed by such ordinary people, right? He said. I'll come down and take a look. Mo said. Okay, you can come down to help. I think you may have more ways in this regard. Obviously, Nanling's cleverness has left a deep impression on her. At this time, Fanny suddenly screamed. Wait, why is there a mushroom growing on my foot? Mo, save me quickly, it's so disgusting. Her voice was trembling. What terrible thing did they encounter? Nanling hurriedly said. Wait a moment, I'll be there soon. Then he walked directly to the gravity projection warehouse. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 240 Strange Planet. Nanling was launched by gravity, and fell rapidly from the hangar of Zhuoxia to the planet King Xuanyo below. He quickly entered the atmosphere, and before the high-speed friction with the atmosphere produced sparks, he used his familiar air shield technique to improve the airflow around him. This made the oncoming airflow smoothly behind him, and even made him glide at high speed in the air without power like surfing. All this was done lightly under the effect of his wind control technique, which was already divided into each level. His talent flowing wind had even been completely integrated into it without any signs. As soon as he entered the atmosphere of this planet, Nanling felt the rich spiritual energy of this planet. This is obviously another planet rich in spiritual energy, and more importantly, it is a pure natural planet. Nanling was a little moved. He felt that he should have a lot of insights on such a planet. Then as he fell into the stratosphere, he made another unexpected discovery. Because he felt a very subtle fluctuation in this stratosphere, like emotional fluctuations, but different. He curiously used the essence to increase his information collection and discrimination, but found that there was a vague feeling of colorful mist around him. It was as if countless emotional auras gathered together, but it seemed to be nothing. The chaotic thoughts would float in front of Nanling from time to time, but when he really caught them and studied them carefully, he would find that these things were actually worthless. He had doubts in his heart, but he could only remember them secretly and study them later when he had time. The most urgent thing was still his wife's affairs, and Fan and I. He fell from the sky, but paused lightly in the air, just like a spirit swallow turning over and hovering at a low altitude near the ground. And the fire-winged flying sword had been floating beside him. Its own wisdom core and spirit furnace could ensure that it would always follow Nanling faithfully. At this time, he landed on the ground and saw that Fan and I had just released a raging fire and burned a big tree with a strange tumor. After he landed, he asked, "What happened?" Mo said, "Just now, the tree suddenly moved and attacked us." Fanny added, "It seems to be because I just burned the spores that grew on my feet." She did scream just now. The fire was still burning, but the tree was no longer moving in the flames. Nanling hesitated for a moment, and suddenly pointed at the burning tree. The next moment, the oxygen was extracted. The flames burning on the tree suddenly went out. Without the combustion-supporting substance, the flames naturally could not burn. Fanny looked at it and exclaimed, "With just this one move of yours, you will probably beat those useless descendants of the Give family. All of them together can't even think of showing anything in front of you." Indeed, this variant of the warm wind technique, the fire extinguishing technique, is to some extent a natural counter to the Give family's fire technique system. But don't forget what level Nanling's wind technique is at this time. This fire extinguishing technique can directly extinguish the burning flame in his hands, but it may only slightly curb the fire in others. Moreover, the real strong ones have long been able to understand the essence of spiritual power, so this method will not work. At this time, the flames went out, and Mo already knew what he should do. He went forward to observe and study the remains of the tree. Nanling's pure faith has not been equipped with any scanning equipment. After all, this combat armor has not undergone his personalized transformation. Mo's Wuzong has complete external equipment. She studied it and said, "This tree is very strange. Judging from its remains, it actually has both plant and animal characteristics." Nanling didn't find it strange to hear this, but just said, "There are many similar carnivorous plants, right?" Mo said, "It's different. This is not just a carnivorous plant." As she said that, she picked up a vine from the ground, and when she pinched the burnt part of the surface, the inside was actually a flesh-like structure. There are even some bone structures. "This is really beyond imagination." Thongchi muttered beside him, "Is this actually a flesh and blood creature, but it just looks like a plant?" At this moment, Li Ji's voice came from above. She said, "I scanned the entire planet. Guess what? I didn't find any animals moving freely outside on this planet. It seems that the entire planet is full of plants. This is very abnormal." Nanling asked in surprise, "What about the ecosystem of this planet?" Li Ji immediately sent a video. It was shot from a high altitude, but it just happened to capture two plants on this planet fighting each other. The winner tore the loser apart, and then quickly decomposed and devoured it as its own food. Fanny looked at it for a while and said, "Well, they seem to have their own ecosystem." She didn't seem to be very surprised. After all, the world is so big that there are all kinds of things. Nanling pondered and said, "It feels like this thing has a high degree of evolution." Mo also nodded in agreement. "We have taken samples of it, and initially found that it has mitochondria that can photosynthesize, and it has a tendon structure similar to that of animals. This is really a creature that combines the dual advantages of plants and animals. It can only be defined as a creature." After a brief thought, Nanling stopped struggling and asked, "How did you get driven out?" "Sister, you and Boss Fanny are both Jindan cultivators. The powerful divine thoughts of Jindan cultivators alone should be enough to suppress those rebels, right?" Fanny said angrily, "That's why it's strange. Those people are desperate, but they have no reaction to our divine thoughts. It's as if our divine thoughts fell into the air." Thongchit frowned and said, "Another point, they are very strange. Maybe there is a reason for them to be full of hostility towards us, but the aggressiveness they show is completely beyond my cognition." Nanling asked, "What do you mean?" Li Ji said, "At this time, I just took samples of the appearance of the residents here, and compared them with all the personnel information in the database. Guess what? These residents from the lower class are all shown as deceased in the ancient domain information database. They all died in accidents or disappeared. The team with digital life is so lucky." At this time, Nanling and the others truly felt how strong this kind of intelligence support is. At this time, Mo suddenly looked at him and asked, "Is there a way to hack into the system here?" Li Ji said, "I'm sorry, the system here is not connected to the outside world, unless you can find the central control device here and act as my transfer bridge." Mo smiled and said, "That's good, at least we have a direction to act. The next step is undoubtedly the sneak entry. In fact, the girls are kind-hearted and don't want to execute all the residents of this colony directly. According to their rebellious behavior and the laws of the Give family, they would have no problem calling the Zhuoxia to bombard the ground." Chapter 241a. Testing Site. The four people on the ground decided to conduct an infiltration operation. In fact, they could leave a group of people here to study these strange creatures. However, considering that there must be comprehensive and complete information in the colony, wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to directly reap the benefits? Nanling wrapped his team with an atmospheric shield, and then said, "Within the range of my atmospheric shield, all our movements will be erased, and most visible light detection can be avoided. I can't do anything about some ultra-short wavelength electromagnetic wave detection." Mo said, "Don't worry, I will help you block that kind of thing." Even if there are omissions, don't we still have the usual? Nanling and Fanna nodded, and then Thongshi asked a little aggrievedly, "What is the usual you were talking about?" Fanna said, "Oh, that's a magic weapon I made before that can be used to hide my body, but unfortunately there is no spare one." Thongshi felt at the time as if Fanny was saying that he was spare. Fortunately, his mind was still strong, he had recognized his position, and had no intention of competing with others for favor. Everyone stopped talking. With the perfect cooperation of Nanling and Mo, they soon entered the colony again. The colony was shrouded in a huge energy shield. The air inside the energy shield seemed to be better than outside. The air outside always felt foggy. Nanling said, "So that's it. The air here is full of tiny spores. The shield of the colony can isolate these spores and prevent them from affecting the health of people inside." Fanna said, "That's natural. Now we should go in, but how do we get in?" Mo had already arrived at an energy node. She looked at the pillar that served as an energy transfer and said lightly, "This place doesn't use a luxurious defensive method like a starship shield. It's obviously a matrix energy shield that uses pillars to transfer. It's very simple to get in. We just need to slightly interfere with one of the nodes. With delicate operations, we can get in without anyone noticing." She started to act while she was talking. Her eyes flashed with bright lightning, and then the small section of the energy shield in front of everyone skipped frames. The next moment, Mo stretched out her hand surrounded by electric light and gently pulled on the shield. She opened a gap in the shield energy wall as if she had lifted a curtain. "Hurry up and go in. We can get things done without alerting anyone." The other three entered one after another, and they felt that Mo's move was really beautiful. So it is said that thunder cultivators are simply foul in this era. They are naturally invincible to most technological equipment. As for why others are not afraid, maybe it is because it is not easy for thunder cultivators to make it to the end. The interior of the colony seemed very tense. Guards in black uniforms kept patrolling, and the residents of the colony gathered in the square to listen to what the fat governor was saying. Seeing this, Fanna became playful and said, "Hurry, come closer and listen to what they're saying." Nanling was speechless. They were hiding in a corner of the colony at this time, which was safe. But if they get closer, even if they have many ways to hide their tracks, no one can guarantee that they will not be exposed. Yes, Nanling is so rigorous. However, he couldn't help but meet his boss's request, so he used his wind controlling technique and a gust of wind brought all the sounds from the other side over here. Damn it, what have we done? That's the daughter of the Gi family. We will all be executed. We've done it. What is there to worry about now? The key is what to do next. Yes, what should we do next? Governor, you asked us to do it, so say something. Governor. Everyone stop arguing. I didn't expect that Master Gikchuan, who has been providing us with funds, would suddenly fall. I really didn't expect it. It's a pity that this place will soon produce results. Yes, this is the last chance. As long as we produce results, Master Gikchuan will definitely regain the right to speak. Ask him to mediate by then, and maybe this matter will be over. But what about that lady? Should we let her stay outside? And what about the ship above our heads? What if that ship attacks us? The governor's fake smile sounded, then we have to speed up our actions. Also, we must capture those 3 people immediately. As long as they are in our hands, the spaceship above our heads will be cautious. It was a rhetoric full of mistakes and omissions. Fanny and Mo frowned as they listened. But these people seemed to be very fond of this rhetoric, and they all cheered as if they had found a way out. At this time, the governor said again, "But the premise of all this is that we have to speed up the experimental process, and we have to went to the last step." Someone asked, "What is that?" The voice was a little trembling, and he seemed a little scared. The governor said, "Just embrace this planet and see what happens." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly put on a set of protective clothing, and then the energy shield over the entire colony fell down by itself. Looking at the energy shield behind them falling, Nanling and others were speechless. It seemed that what they had just done was useless. At this time, Mo's face changed and said, "These people have no protection, and they will be invaded by spores." Nanling was also surprised. He reacted immediately and then summoned a gust of wind to isolate the colony. He used his wind control technique to create a large-scale wind wall for the colony. However, to his surprise, with the withdrawal of the energy shield, the colonists in the square had begun to change. Their skin began to turn dark green, and then the muscle fibers became obviously thicker, and small tentacles similar to plant roots grew on their bodies. This is very strange. Fanny asked in surprise. What's going on? Nanling said in a deep voice. I don't know, I have obviously isolated all the spores, but they seem to be infected by something. Thongcha suddenly said. Maybe they have been infected by something. Don't forget what I said before, they showed abnormal aggressiveness at the time. Everyone thought this made sense. However, at this moment, the governor was shocked when he looked at the wind wall around him, and then he laughed strangely and said, It's useless, miss, these experimental subjects have already reached the last step. We carefully control the dosage, so that they can maintain their human form without turning into strange things. Miss Fanny, didn't you say that we have no output of results? Look, this is a result, a new direction of human enhancement. This entire colony is actually a huge experimental field, and all the residents here are experimental subjects. Nanling murmured, this makes sense now. Indeed, but it's sad. Chapter 242. Terrible experiment. The governor of King Xuanya actually used the entire colony on this planet as a laboratory, and the residents of this colony were his experimental subjects. No wonder the people recruited here are all from the bottom, and they are marked as missing and dead in the files outside. No wonder these people followed the governor to launch a rebellion, because they knew that if they didn't do something, they would lose their current comfortable life. Everything comes from interests. So where is the interest of this governor? He looked at the changes of these colonists excitedly at this time, and then said, See? This is my achievement, I will become a star in the history of human development. I have found a new evolutionary direction for mankind. Fanny thought for a while, and she suddenly walked out of Nanling's atmospheric shield. She is a Jindan cultivator, and it is too simple to disturb Nanling's spell. She walked out and said, No, in my opinion you're an evil person who did a very evil thing. Mo gave Nanling a look at this time, and then he also passed through his atmospheric shield and sneaked away in his own way. Her plan was obvious. While Fanny was distracting the other party, she would immediately go to the control center here and serve as a transfer to Leiji to crack all the information here. And the look he gave Nanling was also very clear, that is, to let him stay here and watch Fanny. If Mo was Fanny's reins to control her, then Nanling was her runway, which could guide this willful young lady in the right direction. The couple had a tacit understanding, and Nanling certainly knew what he should do at this time. So he quietly blew out a gust of wind, blowing the flame aura rising from Fanny's body into a very beautiful and majestic shape. The special effects team, I'm talking about him. Thongcha rolled his eyes and muttered something like flattering ministers and flattering. When Fanny saw the special effects made by Nanling for her, she was so happy. She originally wanted to do it all at once, but now she felt that she had to be a little reserved, otherwise it would be a pity to waste this special effect. The governor turned around and saw Fanny. His eyes obviously flinched and dodged for a moment, but he made up his mind in an instant and said, You are the eldest daughter of the Gyu family, what do you know? According to Fanny's original character, she should have drawn her spiritual sword and stabbed at him without paying any attention to what the other party said. But now she seemed very calm, even elegant. With the flame spirit light fluttering behind her, she was full of powerful and elegant beauty. She looked very elegant. In fact, Fanny was very beautiful and elegant, but her temperament always destroyed this temperament. And now, she was consciously maintaining it herself. It was quite interesting. Fanny said with a light elegance and a strong sense of arrogance, What's the use of something that is neither powerful nor beautiful? You don't need to give me any popular science. With my thinking ability, I can tell at a glance what you have done and what you are going to do. You're experimenting with the lives of these poor people, just to achieve your fame and fortune. At this moment, Leiji's message was transferred over. This governor is called Zhuo Shan. He studied at the Taikuno 5 space station, but not in the Chugyu Academy, but a nominal small college next to it. This learning experience did not bring him any diploma certificates. After that, he only worked as a mercenary in the scientific research community, doing some superficial basic research work. Fanny sneered when she heard it. Zhuo Shan, her. You're such a cruel loser. Are you going to gamble everything here? I'm curious, does Gixuan know what you were doing here? Zhuo Shan's eyes flickered again. He was uneasy about the leakage of his identity information, which showed that the other party had extremely strong technical support means. He didn't want to waste any more time, so with a single command, he could actually command these people who were all dark green and had many root-like tentacles growing on their bodies to pounce on Fanny. Fanny said in annoyance, Damn it, it's this trick again. She was still soft-hearted. Nanling's reaction was much calmer when he saw this, Because in his vision, these people, regardless of gender, age or status, had been wiped out of their previous emotional aura. They might still be saved and have a chance to recover, but why should he bother with it? So he slapped the floating fire-wing flying sword beside him very coldly. This mechanical heavy sword was already under his command and flew above the crowd. As he pinched his fingers to activate the flame spiritual power in it, a cluster of flowing fire appeared on the sword of the fire-wing flying sword, and then scattered a barrage of flame arrows around. The scene was very spectacular. Of course, the lethality was not very good. After all, it was only a LV3 fire control technique, but using this method to perform it highlighted a large amount of fullness. The arrow of fire was only a weak primary fire technique. Anyone who had practiced and was wearing combat armor would not be hurt. However, these so-called enhanced colonists were burned quickly in the flames. Their bodies were ignited and then quickly turned into charcoal in the flames. However, what was strange was that they seemed to have no sense of pain at all, and just quietly burned to ashes in the flames. Fanny was just stunned for a moment, and then looked at Nanling gratefully. She knew that Nanling was helping her do the dirty work that she hesitated or was unwilling to do. At the same time, what Nanling showed also showed her one thing. These residents no longer had any human thinking. Their consciousness seemed to be wiped out in an instant. Damn it. You actually had the guts to do it. The governor Jiushang couldn't help but tremble and said. He was still trying to use moral kidnapping. However, Fanny had already let it go. She happily set a fire and turned all the charred materials around into ashes. Then he said, "First of all, they have been killed by you, and they were not alive in the archives, right?" She did not hesitate or dodge. She no longer cared about how she looked in other people's eyes. She only knew that what she did was right. Because she didn't want others to bear anything for her. She looked at Nanlin, who was calm as if nothing had happened, and then quickly turned to face Governor Jiushang and said, "Look, these experimental products of yours are so weak that they can all be burned by a fire. They are useless." Jiushang said nervously, "It's because the active factors are still working that they were attacked by you. Once they stabilize, they will be perfect." At this moment, Mo's voice came from the side. "All the information has been obtained. Fanny, you delayed well this time. If he activated the self-destruct program, we would get nothing." Fanny turned her head blankly. "Ah? She just wanted to maintain her elegance, why did you delay time?" Then Nanling and Mo exchanged a knowing look, and they were in perfect harmony. Chapter 243 Temporary Retreat. Jiushang shuddered when Mo appeared. He probably didn't expect that Miss Fanny was just a cover. The real hidden hand Mo took away all his research results on this planet. Governor Jiushang felt unbelievable. After a moment of confusion, he was finally left with only determination. Fanny came to her senses and said, "You have already lost. Accept the trial." Then she was ready to burn this man directly. "It's not a big deal. I can ask my father Gichen to arrange someone else." The way the eldest lady inspects the industry. Clean up the industry from top to bottom in a physical sense. However, just as she said this, the colony suddenly shook. The ground shook violently, and Mo and Fanny's faces suddenly changed. They said quickly, "Fly up." Nanling and Thongship took off immediately. Thongship couldn't help asking, "Is the base self-destructing device?" Nanling shook her head and said, "No, there should be something underground. If it's a self-destructing device, since Sister Liji has already invaded here, it shouldn't be activated again." As soon as the voice fell, they took off only about 20 meters away. The ground suddenly sank, and then a huge mouth of the abyss exploded with a rumble, swallowing the entire colony area that was larger than the size of a football field. Moreover, the momentum of the huge mouth did not decrease, and it was still rushing upwards, trying to swallow that 4 people in the sky. The 4 people naturally flew upwards rapidly. At the same time, in the distant sky, a thick energy ray also penetrated the atmosphere and shot obliquely, hitting the side of the abyss with incomparable accuracy. Boom! The main gun of the Vuoxia pierced the body of this terrifying and huge creature from the side, plowing a gully on the ground next to it. And this terrifying giant also tilted to the side, and then fell to the ground with a bang and lay obliquely on the ground. Dust was raised and could not fall down for a while, making it difficult to see what was happening below. However, everyone's combat armor had already penetrated the dust. They clearly saw that the long giant creature was still shrinking back into the ground slowly even though its body was pierced. It was not dead. In this case, everyone did not dare to fall. Fanny's eyes darted downwards, and then Mo pulled her back and said, "Don't use your divine sense. Don't forget that this is dangerous." Nanling wanted to scratch his head. This was really a difference in concept. If he had a golden ellipse-level divine sense, he would definitely explore it. But people in this era prefer to use advanced equipment for scanning and detection, and try not to put themselves in danger. It was at this time that Liji's voice rang out. The detection equipment on the Zhuoxia cannot conduct a deep scan of the ground. There seems to be a layer of material that can shield detection under the surface soil of this planet. Nanling immediately gave his rigorous advice. Why don't we go back to the Zhuoxia first and study the information we have obtained before making plans? The entire colony was destroyed. At this time, it was actually time to say hello to Gi Chen, the current owner of this planet. But Fanna didn't care about it. Instead, she seemed very excited when she encountered a difficult problem. She was obviously enjoying the process. Everyone had no objection to Nanling's proposal, and they all stood up and flew towards the Zhuoxia. Nanling showed the new form of his new equipment at this time. I saw that the fire-wing flying sword suddenly separated from it, and then the hilt of the sword was embedded in a slot on his back, and the sword body was spread out along the middle of the sword guard like the skeleton of a flying bird's wings. The next moment, a curtain of fire appeared on the separated sword edge, and it became a real fire wing. Sure enough, the characteristics of this mechanical heavy sword are reflected in the name. Fanny, who loves swordsmanship, felt very uncomfortable when she saw this. She felt that she could not accept such a sword. She said, "Xiaonan, I thought your sword was used to cut people." Nanling said, "I have already said that this is the fire-wing flying sword, it is used to fly." Fanna still found this incredible, but she was not a person who was loyal to the sword, so she could only helplessly say, "Whatever you say, it is." But this annoyed Thongship, who was a very conservative person. He said, "But the sword has its own spirituality. Only if we are sincere to the sword can we become one with it and experience its power." Nanling thought for a while and said, "But I practice spear." Thongship's blood was boiling at the time. He said, "No matter what you practice, you must respect your weapon after all. Otherwise, can you imagine the feeling of having your spear stepped on?" Nanling's eyes lit up at the time, and he thought, "Why didn't I think of this?" So he pulled out his long unused spiritual spear, Benlan, from the foldable backpack on his back, and then put it under his feet and exerted a little force. The next moment, he flew out with a whoosh. Flying with a spear, who wouldn't be incapable of doing so? At the same time, in this process, he discovered why legends like to fly by stepping on the sword. This is because there is a spiritual power circuit inside the sword and other weapons at this time, and this spiritual power circuit has both input and output. The input is obviously to maintain the spiritual power inside, and the output is to maintain its function as a vehicle. At this time, the input direction is the sword guard and the sword jaw, while the output is the entire sword body and the hilt. So if a person flies with the sword, it actually affects the output of the sword's spiritual power. Then, stepping on the weapon under their feet to control it can not only exert its full output effect, but also free the cultivator's hands to do other things. The hard shell of the spiritual weapon can also withstand the high-speed spiritual power, which greatly increases the flying speed. Of course, this method of controlling weapons is only suitable for the low-end game. The bodies of the great monks after the high-end have long adapted to the operation of their own spiritual power. If they are in a hurry, it is definitely more convenient to use various escape techniques and rainbow transformation techniques. Nanling figured out the pros and cons of this in a short time, and then got off his spiritual spear and said, "It can be used without a wingsuit, but it is not necessary with a wingsuit." That's right, the wingsuit of this era can perfectly solve the problem of flying, and there is no need to do it again. Thongship still insisted. "Your attitude is wrong." Nanling said, "But you only made my wingsuit into the shape of a sword, or I will change it into a door panel when I go back." Thongship seemed to be humiliated, and he said, "You actually made the sword into the shape of a door panel." He couldn't stand people like Nanling. Nanling couldn't bear it anymore, and he said, "Okay, I don't know swords, okay." Thongship said with a serious expression, "Then I will be responsible for teaching you." It seems that in his concept, Nanling's attitude of not being sincere to the sword is really a heinous crime. He felt very aggrieved, because Nanling was a treacherous person trusted by his eldest daughter. He couldn't teach her a lesson directly, so he could only try to change her mind. Nanling laughed indifferently. Okay, she didn't seem to mind at all. He thought that he would close the door to visitors after returning to the ship. Anyway, with Liji's help, Thongship would definitely not be able to find him. But he didn't expect one thing, that is, Fana seemed to be very interested in this matter. Chapter 244. Changes in the way of the sword. What happened on King Xuanyo was actually very bad, but the planet itself is also full of mystery. Just one point alone can make this planet full of value. The life on this planet can be traced back to 500 million years ago. In other words, this is a planet that has not been poisoned by the dark locusts, which is very important for human beings to study the development and changes of life in the Milky Way. Of course, such planets are not unique. In the process of human exploration of the Milky Way, a rule has actually been discovered, that is, the dark locusts do not seem to appear on planets with only primitive life, but have a special liking for human technological products. Every attack on a planet with dark locusts is a difficult battle, because those dark locusts will fall into a manic state after the human landing troops appear in the planet's atmosphere. Although the Governor Judoshan is a rubbish researcher, he has also done a lot of biological research. It should be said that the colony of this planet was really doing serious research in the early days. It's just that some changes happened later. Mo and Li Ji are analyzing these materials. They can extract the information they need at the fastest speed. And Nanling has to face the serious redstone during this short rest time. This Thongsha really wanted to teach him the way of the sword. He couldn't even hide, because Boss Fanny also got involved, and her interest in destroying people came up again. Nanling felt so uncomfortable at the time. Couldn't he just comprehend and cultivate his wind spirit power? Besides, couldn't he just practice the spear well? Why waste time practicing the sword? But the boss gave him money to teach him the way of the sword, and he couldn't refuse. Especially since Boss Fana had learned bad things, and who knows who she learned a trick to control Nanling from. Study hard, and I'll give you a bonus if you learn well. Nanling was very energetic at the time, and said that he would study hard and make progress every day. Fana felt that she still had a talent for persuading learning, and she felt a sense of satisfaction as a teacher at the time. Then Thongshe wanted to teach from the most basic swordsmanship, but Fana thought that was too troublesome and interrupted directly. Don't you want to teach him the way of the sword? Then just start with the way of the sword. Thongshe thought that this was not okay, it was simply heresy. However, Fana said, you are so annoying. If you can't do it, just get out of the way. I will teach you. Thongshe was at a loss. Fana had already pushed him away. Then Fana said to Nanling, we don't have that much time to spend on the basics. Anyway, you don't like practicing swords, right? In that case, let's start with the way of the sword. First, you need a sword of your own. Fana held up her own sword, the spiritual sword full of spiritual power. Nanling reached out and grabbed his mechanical heavy sword, which was the fire wing flying sword. He thought it was a sword. Fana twitched her lips when she saw this, and then said, okay, just think of it as your sword. And now, you have to feel your sword, recognize your sword, and then describe your sword in your mind. Nanling asked curiously, is this the way of the sword? Fana said, this is the way of the sword. The beginning of the way of the sword is to know what your sword is. Or what it means to you. Nanling raised his eyebrows and felt that what Boss Fana said was profound. Thongshe also raised his eyebrows and confirmed that this was what they had learned in the swordsmanship class at the Chugyu Academy. He was very annoyed. He found that it was simply Miss Fana who suddenly wanted to destroy people tirelessly, so she had the idea of teaching Nanling. Anyway, Thongshe was very unhappy and felt that Fanny was wasting time. It was not only wasting Nanling's time, but also wasting his own time. Of course, according to Fanny's personality, she was simply too bored during the rest period and needed to find some fun for herself. Nanling knew his boss, so he cooperated very well. Zhin just sat cross-legged, and then held the mechanical giant sword in front of him and carefully comprehended it. As for what to comprehend, this sword was originally designed and manufactured by him, and his understanding of it can be said to be very thorough. So what is this sword to him? Oh, what is he willing to regard it as? Nanling explored the hull of the fire wing flying sword with his divine consciousness, and even penetrated into the gaps of every part. Of course, he would not really sense anything, but just think about Fana's question. He would not despise Fana's question just because it seemed empty, mainly because the sentence really touched his mood. He thought about it and felt that the fire wing flying sword was his own work, or even his own child. Therefore, Nanling had a faint love for the fire wing flying sword in his heart. Even though there were obviously many defects on the sword, it was also due to his low level at the time. So his feelings for the fire wing flying sword should be love and tolerance. In this way, his mind that was groping for the sword body naturally included these emotions. Then, the sword body began to tremble silently. The magical thing was that it was not the trembling and collision between the parts, but the trembling of the entire sword body as a whole, and there was even a faint feeling of sword ringing. Thongqi and Fana had already left the room at this time. After all, Nanling wanted to feel the way of the sword, and he could not be disturbed. And it was under this situation that Nanling realized one thing. Thongqi was right when he said that the sword was spiritual. But the sword spirit is not originally there, but given by people. This sword is made of various spiritual materials, and the reason why spiritual materials are spiritual materials is that they have stronger spiritual power characteristics. And spiritual power is the conceptualization of various forces running between heaven and earth, which can be affected by human will and produce various changes. In other words, spiritual power and spiritual materials can be used as carriers of will. At this time, Nanling's love and tolerance in his mind were very pure. It fell into the sword body of the fire-wing flying sword, and integrated the spiritual power running in each part of it, which made the sword body emit a buzzing sound as if it were one. However, Nanling soon felt a kind of disharmony again. This kind of disharmony was very familiar to him, and it came from the wisdom core. That is, the constant power of the wisdom core began to oppose him again. He turned off the wisdom core on the fire-wing flying sword at the time, and then continued what he had just done. Sure enough, this time it was much smoother. He gradually felt that he and the sword were about to merge into one, and as long as he thought about it, he could easily control it, as if he had an arm to point at it. This process was so easy that even he was surprised. Then he suddenly thought of one thing, that is, he was full of passion when making this sword. He poured his emotions into this sword from the beginning, so it was easy to bless it now. What's more important is that he found that when his emotions would bless this sword, the spiritual power contained in its spirit furnace gradually began to change and began to be filled with his emotions. Sure enough, compared with spiritual materials, spiritual power is the most suitable carrier of will besides the body. His spiritual thoughts full of emotions finally accumulated in the spirit furnace of this mechanical heavy sword, and they did not dissipate even if he withdrew them. In other words, he seemed to be doing something weird again. Anyway, he didn't find a similar phenomenon in all the weapon-making courses in the Chugyu Academy. He could find some similar descriptions from the Immortal Cultivation novels he read in his previous life. Could it be that this sword is nurturing the sword spirit? Nanling's eyes lit up. If it was really a sword spirit, it would be very interesting. Chapter 245. One Night of Sword Enlightenment. If Nanling had only used his own emotions to infect the fire-wing flying sword before, then when he was completely interested, he made an attempt that ordinary people could hardly do. That is to inject the power of one's own concept of existence into the spirit furnace of this mechanical heavy sword. This power of one's own concept of existence, that is, the essence and his most pure thoughts, is the most mysterious power that belongs to him alone. It is Ki, my spiritual power. It exists between essence and thoughts, and is the transit point between the reality of one's own essence and the emptiness of thoughts. It is a power between reality and emptiness. At this time, he was only at the 7th level of foundation building, and the speed of cultivation had actually slowed down. It was not because his speed of refining spiritual power slowed down, but because he deliberately stopped this process, just to extract the purest Ki as much as possible and store it in the sea of Ki in the chest. He cherished this power very much, because in his opinion, this might be the power involving his origin. Sure enough, when he injected this Ki into the spirit furnace of the fire-wing flying sword, he could feel his body starting to weaken. Not only was his physical strength exhausted, but his spirit was also weakened a lot. Because when these Ki were in his body, he didn't feel it, but when he used it up, he clearly felt the double reduction of his own energy and spirit. Nanling sighed and stopped this operation. He would not let himself bear the consequences of such trouble. However, this experiment is very interesting. He has decided to divide some of the Ki in his body to the fire-wing flying sword if there is too much Ki in the future. He wants to see what changes will happen to this sword under such a slow influence. Well, if you want to talk about changes, it actually has. That is, at this time, it is full of a light red spiritual light. This is the spiritual light of the fire spirit power, which is slowly flowing in the various spiritual patterned channels in the fire-wing flying sword. This is a very interesting phenomenon, as if the fire-wing flying sword is also cultivating itself like humans have meridians. In fact, this was caused by Nanling's thoughts. After his Ki entered the spirit furnace of the fire-wing flying sword, it produced a wonderful chemical reaction with the emotions imprinted by his divine thoughts. Those emotional imprints combined with Ki and actually produced a power similar to divine thoughts. And these divine thoughts were like an extension of Nanling's divine thoughts. He only needed to think about it to make this mechanical heavy sword produce a corresponding reaction. This feeling, Nanling couldn't explain it. He just felt that it was very similar to the refining magic weapon in the Immortal Cultivation novels he saw in his previous life. Maybe this is a kind of refining. Nanling's eyes became brighter and brighter. He felt that he had touched a brand new field, a range that no one in this era had explored. This is fun, really fun. He even completely forgot what he was doing. His mind and soul were completely integrated with the fire-wing flying sword. He was very curious about what this phenomenon would become if it continued to develop. So after a whole day, Fanny dragged Thongshi over to continue teaching. She had forgotten what she had told Nanling yesterday. She just liked to see Nanling's thoughtful or surprised expression when listening to her words. This feeling of being a role model and destroying others tirelessly was really great. Then, she pushed the door and entered the room where Nanling was and was stunned for a moment. Because she only saw the fire-wing flying sword, the fire-wing flying sword gave her a strong sense of Jdu, and the shadow of Nanling instantly appeared in her jinn and spiritual perception. Xiaonan turned into a sword. She was stunned for a moment. But the next moment she realized that something was wrong, because Nanling's body was right next to the fire-wing flying sword, but she just ignored it. But what happened to this neglect? Unlike her ability to react quickly, Thongshi didn't realize what happened at all. His eyes were already blank, because in his eyes, it seemed that Nanling had completely transformed into a thick, wide, and flaming giant sword. It was not until Nanling said, "Is it time for class again?" Thongshi came back to his senses. He trembled a little, and the scene just now made him feel deeply shocked. Fanny asked excitedly, "Xiaonan, what happened to you just now? Did you find anything interesting?" Nanling nodded repeatedly and said, "Yes, boss, thanks to your advice." Fanny pointed at herself in astonishment and asked, "I gave you advice?" Nanling nodded repeatedly and said, "Didn't you ask me to think about what the sword means to me? I figured it out, at least it's like this now." As he said that, he flicked the blade at the fire-wing flying sword and said, "The sword is me." As soon as the voice fell, as if to echo his words, the entire fire-wing flying sword had already begun to ring softly by itself. The sword was ringing, very spiritual. And Thongshi's worldview collapsed all of a sudden. He just wondered why this world was so unfair. Fanny asked with great interest, "My Gi family is good at using swords, but in fact, the origin of swordsmanship should be the Star Federation, where there are many sword schools, and your state just now is classified as the realm of sword no self. This is already a very high realm of swordsmanship. Even in my Gi family, only some martial arts fanatics who were obsessed with swordsmanship can reach this realm. I didn't expect you to be able to enter it after one night of sword enlightenment." This is the reason why Thongshi felt a huge gap in his heart, because he had enough experience to know what this realm represents, so he felt uncomfortable. It's ridiculous that he was still scolding Nanling for not respecting the sword the day before, but the next day Nanling directly climbed to the highest point of swordsmanship to look down on him. Little did he know that Nanling didn't feel any joy at this situation, and even thought it should be taken for granted. Because what he practiced was not the swordsmanship, but the cognition of self. Sword no self. Nanling felt that his realm was not no self, but sword non-self. That is, the sword is me, but the sword is not entirely me. In fact, this state has nothing to do with the sword, it's just that he happened to refine a sword-shaped wingsuit. At this time, this fire-winged flying sword can be called his magic weapon. No, perhaps it should be called a spiritual treasure. Fana said enviously again. This sword has begun to become spiritual, right? I heard that only a true and sincere master of swordsmanship can spiritualize his sword. Shonen, you are too amazing, right? As long as you take out this sword, no matter what you do with it, no one below the master of swordsmanship will have the right to say that you don't understand swordsmanship. These words seemed to have touched Thongshi. Thongshi was really touched and felt very uncomfortable. Well, he had to admit that he was no longer qualified to say that Nanling didn't understand swordsmanship and didn't respect swordsmanship. He was completely convinced by Nanling. There was nothing he could do if he didn't accept it. In order to shut him up, this guy actually realized the sword and became a master of swordsmanship overnight. Isn't the subordinate to this young lady too arrogant? Thongshi was filled with a deep sense of defeat, and the youthful spirit and drive he had originally possessed were gone. It seemed that he had let it go, but it seemed that he had found that he could not roll over and therefore lay flat. Chapter 246. New chapter of Kendo. While Thongshi was doubting his life, Fana had already started discussing this method of spiritualizing spiritual tools with Nanling. She knew Nanling too well. She had all kinds of strange ideas in her mind all day long. It was very likely that there was another breakthrough. They couldn't stop talking, so they simply dragged Mo to participate. Nanling shared her gains, and Fanny and Mo also tried it, and they each gained something. In this process, they summed up a rule. Any spiritual tool, if it only has spiritual pattern lines, can carry the emotions and ki of the cultivator, but it is not very efficient. If there is an energy core, even if it is only used to store spiritual power, the effect will be completely different. Just like Nanling, he tried this spiritual spear Bendlin again, and found that the original crystal at the tip of the Bendlin spear had the same effect. In fact, because it was not diluted by the fire spiritual power like in the fire spirit furnace, the spiritualization effect of Bendlin was even better. However, with Nanling's current cultivation, it was too difficult to refine two spiritual tools at the same time, so he temporarily put Bendlin aside and focused on refining the fire wing flying sword. Besides, the collapsed spiritual spear was just a makeshift transitional equipment for him. If he wanted to use it, he had to make a spiritual spear for himself. Although Fanny criticized Nanling for making her wingsuit look like a sword, it was undeniable that Nanling's discovery this time inspired her greatly. She didn't think this method was difficult, but no one had ever thought about it from this perspective before. Because except for those true fanatics, who would regard their weapons as everything. In the universal value of this era, instead of spending so much effort on a piece of equipment to improve its limited power, it is better to directly replace it with a new one with better materials and better design. This is a difference in thinking. But now Nanling's method can obviously improve the power of his weapon by a level in a short time, which is very cost-effective. Nanling taught his method without reservation and did not reject Hongxi, which benefited him a lot. So Hongxi felt the spiritual light on his beloved sword with emotion, and felt a pain in his balls. He had no position to blame Nanling at all. At the same time, because of Nanling's guidance, he found that his foundation building state was actually loosened. Originally, he had no idea how to break through to the 9th level of foundation building, but now, with his understanding of his fire-type spiritual sword, his understanding of fire spiritual power has also increased. Because of this, Hongxi could no longer show any firm stance in front of Nanling. He felt that no matter what Nanling said about the sword, he felt that he could accept it. After 3 days of such a lively time, Li Ji finally conducted a comprehensive screening and sorting of all the research data of this colony. In fact, it is not difficult to sort out the data, but the difficulty lies in decrypting the data. These are all encrypted data, which means that Li Ji has just become a digital life and is inexperienced, so it took so much time. When the decrypted data was displayed in front of everyone, the entire Zhuoxia fell into silence for a while. They were all digesting the data in their own way. Nanling was the same. He was very surprised at the development process of this colony. Originally, this King Xuan colony was not surprising. It was a group of scientists hired by Xuan to conduct various sampling and research here. But the creatures on this planet were too fierce. The life forms that combined the characteristics of plants and animals were very strong. The process of establishing the colony was full of hardships. At the time, Shan was not the governor. He was just one of many ordinary researchers, and he even had to obey the orders of scientists in the colony. He was responsible for biological research, but at the time he was only responsible for a very superficial part, just simply sampling the creatures on this planet. However, all the changes happened at a certain moment. Shan suddenly bypassed his superior scientist and reported directly to Xuan that a unique activation factor could be extracted from the biological body of this planet. This activation factor can promote the rapid evolution of all life forms. Moreover, this evolution process is actually a rapid oxidation process. The bodies of these life forms are changed by these activation factors, and the bodies become extremely oxygen-rich, providing energy for the body changes. What's interesting is that if there are more nutrients-rich in activation factors in this change process, it will also be greatly accelerated. Nanling then understood why the alienated residents in the previous colonies and the strange creatures on this planet were particularly easy to ignite. It turned out that this was due to the physical state of the activation factor when it was activating the body. Once the goal of activation is achieved, the creatures will quickly reach a stable state, and their physical fitness will improve dramatically. The only thing that is not so good is that these activated targets will lose their original consciousness and become beings with only biological instincts. Shan proposed this research goal, which was exactly what Xuan wanted, and immediately changed the research direction of the colony, making Shan the demon governor. From then on, this colony became a graveyard for the bottom survivors. Especially when they found that these lives could be controlled by built-in mechanical subbrains, it was even more out of control. Just embed these subbrains into their nerve centers, and these bodies can be controlled mechanically. Duoshan even considered the possibility that the subbrain might be hacked by high-end technicians, and made it into a closed system, which was controlled by a completely independent AI relying on the initial obedience instructions. This is very good, because that means that all creatures buried in the subbrain will only recognize the object of obedience instructions to be loyal, without having to worry about being taken away by the technology master. Although this is a bit stupid, it is safe. But when Nanling finished reading these experimental data, he sneered at Duoshan. He said helplessly, "If this active factor is studied carefully, it can indeed be used as an extremely effective way to strengthen. But his research is too barbaric and superficial, isn't it?" Mo also said helplessly, "This kind of practical research that uses human light is indeed easy to produce results, but this kind of result is actually likely to be a small gain at the expense of the big. But the basic research here is very solid and comprehensive, and this activation factor is indeed magical. I'm going to send this information to the master. What do you think, Fanny?" Fanny shrugged and said, "Okay, I have no objection." In her opinion, her mission to this planet has been completed. The entire colony has been destroyed, and her father can just send new people to study it. She is quite bored now and is thinking about where to go next. Mo is uploading information, while Nanling continues to quickly browse the information obtained from the colony. He quickly skipped the relevant experimental part. Those things were too cruel and bloody, and he didn't like them. He was still very interested in the information about this planet, because there was a vast ocean of emotions in the atmosphere of this planet, which was obviously wrong. But when he saw the part about this planet, he was suddenly stunned. Something seemed to be wrong. He suddenly projected a scan of the planet in the middle. Then he pointed to one of the plateaus and said, "Do you think the terrain of this plateau looks a bit strange?" Everyone listened to him and looked at it. At first, they didn't think so, but soon they vaguely discovered that the terrain of this plateau looked like a giant beast lying on the ground. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 247, Gene Decoding. Nanling's discovery did arouse some interest among the crowd, but not much. After all, what strange shapes can't nature create? Nanling was not surprised by this. He suggested, "I want to go down and take a look. I always feel that this planet is not that simple." Fanny asked, "This planet looks like a low-level life planet that has not developed intelligent civilization." "This is very common." Nanling said, "No, I don't think it's common. If you use your divine sense in the stratosphere and feel it carefully, you will find that this is unusual." Mo frowned and said, "Are you using your divine sense casually again? I remember telling you that this is just a power used to facilitate the control of equipment. It is best not to use it directly for perception." Nanling shook his head and said, "No, this is the power that we cultivators use to perceive the world." Mo was a little angry. "Have you forgotten the suffering you suffered in the virtual substance? She is absolutely scary when she is angry." "Didn't you see?" Fanny's face suddenly become serious and she dared not say a word. But Nanling insisted, "That is just the price I have to pay. How can a cultivator like me give up my most unique perspective just because of a little risk?" Mo was very angry. She said, "I think you have forgotten the pain after the wound healed. Do you think I will save him again next time?" She stopped talking because she knew how could she not save him. Nanling smiled, a rather rogue smile. He said, "Okay, I know Sister Mo will protect me, but this time I really have a discovery. You'll know if you come with me and try it." Mo was helpless all of a sudden. She felt that she was being controlled by Nanling. She could only say, "Okay, let's go and take a look together." As soon as she finished speaking, she took the lead and walked towards the hangar. Fanny was also interested after hearing what Nanling said, and she was eager to go. Thongxia showed a slightly hesitant look. But Thongxia was Fanny's follower, so he must follow Fanny. At this time, Nanling seemed to see his hesitation and said directly, "Thongxia, why don't you stay here and wait for Uncle Gichen and the others to inquire? There must be someone on the boat. After all, Sister Liji is not familiar with the uncle and aunt." Fanny immediately waved her hand and said, "That's right, then you stay on the boat, we will just go down to take a look." Thongchip breathed a sigh of relief. In fact, his cultivation was getting better and better at this time, and he didn't want to cause trouble. This is the disadvantage of being around Fanny. It is easy to have no quiet time for cultivation. Fortunately, Nanling is particularly good at dealing with Fanny in this regard, and Thongchip can't help but feel grateful for this. His perception of Nanling has greatly changed. He found that Fanny may really need such a person around her, who can serve as an important link to balance Fanny's needs and the needs of others around her. The three of them loaded their respective wingsuits and soon launched from the hangar again. Nanling was still flying with his mechanical giant sword on his back, and his fire wings were flying, looking very handsome. Anyway, Fanny was getting more and more jealous. But she was not yet to the point of being moved. They came to the stratosphere of King Xuan's atmosphere, where Nanling saw the ocean of emotions. They hovered here, and the three of them simultaneously sent out their divine thoughts. Then they all showed surprise. This is really an ocean of emotions, or an ocean where countless chaotic thoughts converge. This ocean is full of the most straightforward basic emotions of various lives, as well as very simple instinctive thoughts. Mo exclaimed in the communication. This is an ocean of collective will, the collective will of all life on this planet. Fanny also became cautious. It's better not to have too much contact with this collective will. I feel like they are trying to assimilate me. Nanling said with emotion. I roughly understand why the residents of those colonies quickly alienated after the protective shield was removed. I blocked the spores in the air for them, but the small amount of activation factors that already existed in their bodies were activated by this ocean of collective will covering the entire planet. Nanling hesitated for a moment, and then he said, this activation factor, why do I feel that there are strong traces of artificiality? This reminded Mo, and she woke up and said, yes, this activation factor has extremely strong traces of artificiality. Its characteristics that can almost make all organisms evolve rapidly should not be naturally generated. While talking, the three of them actually had a round table meeting directly in this high altitude. The fire-winged flying sword behind Nanling closed up, and then came to his feet, making him stand up. Standing on the sword above the 9 heavens, flying in the air, this looks very cool. Seeing this, Fanny also wanted to follow suit, but she was too bulky in the combat armor after all, so it would be better to use the wingsuit to maintain the flying posture. Mo glanced at Fanny, but stepped lightly on the fire-wing flying sword. She could stand with Nanling legally. The sword was 2 meters long and 30 centimeters wide, and it would not be crowded for 2 people to stand on it. Nanling said, if you like it, I will make one for you. Mo was slightly stunned, and then did not respond. She just said, back to the matter of the activation factor, I specially checked the research data with Sister Liji and found that the original colony did not do nothing. At least they collected more than 10,000 genetic maps of the planet's life forms. Now Sister Liji is conducting a big data comparison. Before she finished speaking, Liji had sent a message. The comparison results are out. It's really a mess of fragmented genetic information. Even creatures that look similar in appearance don't have a similar genetic map. If the life on this planet looks very similar, then it really just looks like it. It seems that there is no close relationship between any of their individuals. But this is simply impossible. Mo said, is this the effect of the activation factor? Nanling nodded and said, yes, this can be considered so. But to be more precise, every species on this planet has a hodgepodge of genes, and it seems to have infinite evolutionary possibilities. Fanny said, it's incredible. According to what you said, all life on this planet has no stable genetic form inheritance, so how did they reproduce to the present? Is it all disordered self-division? However, at this time, Liji said that she had given a new research result, which was some fragmentary genetic information fragments. She said, these are the most frequently appearing gene fragments after big data comparison. If you combine them, it is not difficult to find that they have a strong continuity. In other words, these gene fragments are very likely to come from the same individual or race. And they can still be preserved in such a disordered evolution of this planet, which is enough to reflect the superiority of these gene fragments themselves. Mo, Nanling and Fan and I realized one thing in an instant, and they almost said in unison. Higher life. These gene fragments indicate that higher life once existed on this planet. Chapter 248. Giant Beast Plateau. The three of them sat together in the stratosphere. Fanny took off the wingsuit on her back and put it under her butt like a skateboard to maintain flight. She now thought it was a good posture and looked very elegant. Mo also felt that it was not good to stand with Nanling all the time, so she also followed Fanny's posture and sat on the wingsuit in the suspended mode in a more ladder-like manner. They talked about the uniqueness of this planet while waiting for Gichen's reply. At this time, Li Ji sent a picture. It was a black giant beast, which looked mighty and domineering, covering the sky and the sun. It felt that the mountains and rivers were like a carpet under its feet. Nanling said in surprise, "Is it the restored picture of the plateau?" Li Ji said, "Seeing that you're bored, I made an optimized picture to show you." Seeing this, Fanny immediately said, "Let's go and take a look." Nanling and Mo both nodded, and they flew quickly to the place where the plateau was. They did not change their postures, and they were still lazy, except for Mo. Fanny found that she liked this feeling and began to think about whether she should also get a sword-shaped wingsuit. At least it would be very comfortable to fly lying down. But when she appeared in front of the continent, she was suddenly shocked and sat up. Mo also stood up at once, and the wingsuit was naturally loaded on her back again, forming the best maneuvering mode. Nanling stood on the sword of the fire-wing flying sword and looked around. It was indeed like a huge beast lying on the ground, with half of its ferocious head buried in the bottom of the soil, forming a strange and quite round mountain peak, and after its back extended, it formed a vast plateau mountain range. Nanling asked, "How big is this plateau?" Li Ji said, "It occupies almost a quarter of the land area. Of course, 83% of the planet's surface is covered by water." Nanling exclaimed, "Can there be such a big beast in the world?" Before Fanny and Mo could speak, a calm, wise and mature woman's voice sounded, "Yes, but it is not common, especially now after the rampage of the underworld locusts." A projection appeared beside everyone. It turned out to be Gichen's adjutant Baishan. Fanny seemed very embarrassed at the time and timidly called out, "Auntie Bai?" Baishan looked at Fanny with a strange expression. She felt angry and amused because she couldn't do anything with her. She said, "When you tricked me into drinking that drink that day, you called me Mom." Fanny was very embarrassed, but she was a very single person. After the embarrassment, she immediately started to fight back. She said, "What's the matter? Didn't I finally make your wish come true after so many years? I thought you should thank me." Baishan felt a headache when he saw Fanny putting all her hardness on her mouth. This girl was too unlikable. But there was no way, he still had to like her, now she was his own child. So Baishan glared at Fanny fiercely, telling her to be careful. He greeted Mo again, and it seemed no different from the past. Then he greeted Nanling, who was quite cordial. Mo sent a message. "We were all raised by Aunt Bai, so for us, Aunt Bai and Mother are actually not much different." Nanling immediately understood something after hearing this. This is also the mother-in-law. He immediately showed a very kind and innocent smile, and said to Baishan, "Hello, Aunt Bai, do you have any instructions?" Baishan roughly understood what Nanling meant, and she said unhappily, "You are smart, but this time I came to you because of your things on King Xuan'er. To be honest, I was also surprised when I saw the situation on King Xuan'er. Now we preliminarily judged that there was an ancient civilization on this planet. A professional team is rushing here now. Your father will lead the team personally to decipher the ancient civilization that once existed here." Fanny sneered. "He is really idle. Didn't he get so many industries? He didn't even go to clean up and organize them." Baishan said, "What are you thinking about? He doesn't have the time to deal with such things." As soon as he got the industries originally under Gicchuan's name, he applied for trusteeship in the Gic clan. Fanny asked in astonishment, "Then this planet?" Baishan said, "Didn't I send you the list before applying for the hosting? I asked you to pick and choose if there was a place you liked and you chose this place." Her words were very coercive, as if it was really like this. However, Nanling felt that Gicchen might really not care about this kind of thing. Mo understood and said, "Double 10 rule?" Fanny asked blankly, "What is double 10 rule?" Baishan said helplessly, "I really don't know if you were a child of Yu's family. You don't even know this most important inheritance rule. The so-called double 10 rule means that the children of nobles can obtain certain resources from the clan when they start their business, and in the process of operation and growth, they can ask the clan to make additional investments on the premise of passing the review. In this process of development, either the children of nobles themselves propose to hand over the industry, or when the industry develops to a certain scale, the children of nobles will have two choices. One is to continue to operate these industries and get 10% of the industry profit every year. The second is to entrust the industry to the clan, and choose to transfer 10% of the industry to his own name and become private property, but from then on, the entrusted industry in the clan has nothing to do with him. Nanling was stunned for a moment, realizing that this might be the general development model of large families. When she was in Fenyu, Miss Fenyu might have done the same. At first glance, this distribution method might seem unreasonable. But the problem is that the industries of the children of the big families can develop, which is largely due to the support of the huge family resources. And more importantly, if they choose to continue to operate, even if they can only get 10% of the profit share, what if they can control the large amount of resources of that industry to lay that foundation for their own industry? Blood transfusion should not be possible, but if it is just for some convenience, it would be too convenient. In comparison, trusteeship and handing over is not so cost-effective, because even if there are real assets in their own name, they will also lose a lot of resources that can be controlled. Just like Yu Chuan, these properties were taken away from him, which should be the second rule of the Double 10 rule enforced. Except for the assets he gets, other things are no longer relevant to him. Fanny said in surprise, "So, this planet belongs to us?" Then her face changed again, and she said with a distressed look, "If I had known earlier, I would have found a way to save the colony." Baisheng shook her head and said, "Gipchuan has so many divested industries, and you just picked a problematic one at random. I really don't know how to describe your luck." Fanny's luck, how to describe it, is extremely metaphysical. Nanling was alert at the time, because if Fanny had good luck, it must mean that there were creatures around her who would suffer. This kind of luck obtained by sacrificing other lives is too weird. Chapter 249 New Colony. The world played a big joke on Fanny. She was so carefree that she just thought that the colony was destroyed and didn't care at all. But she never thought that she was destroying the house. She was embarrassed again. But this girl was very responsible. She immediately stood up and said, "What are you afraid of? Let's build another colony." Sister Liji, prepare to launch the landing module of Zhuoxia. I plan to build a colony directly with the landing module. Liji did not dissuade her, but just said, "Please specify the landing location of the landing module." Fanny couldn't make up her mind again. She looked at the two people around her for help. Nanling pondered at the time and said, "The site of the previous colony was good, but now it seems that if we want to build a base there, we have to guard against the giant earthworm." Mo nodded and said, "In fact, we don't need to care about the surrounding environment. What we should consider is how to facilitate our research on this planet. There must be a big secret on this planet. The ancient code exists in the genetic fragment of all life on this planet. In the next period of time, biological research should be the most important thing." Nanling smiled and said, "It seems that this area should be it." As he said that, he projected a picture in front of him, which was a narrow plain between the edge of the giant beast plateau and the coastline. The species here are very rich and the climate is very pleasant. Various life individuals thrive here and fight each other. It must be said that this is definitely a treasure trove of biological samples. The landing module can be built on the giant beast plateau, and mineral resources can be mined nearby during the process. Nanling has narrowed down the selection range for the site of the new colony. Then Mo pointed to the edge of the mountain range that looked like a claw tentacle on the giant beast plateau and said, "This place is obviously more suitable because it is backed by the mountain range and closer to the ocean. We can also strengthen our research on the marine environment." The young couple had almost pointed out the correct answer to Fanny, and she nodded repeatedly. Then she said, "Okay, let's build a base there." The scallion white finger had already poked at a place in front of the projection. Nanling. Mo. Liji. The three of them were silent for a while, because the location Fanny chose had nothing to do with the analysis just now. She poked her finger at the top of the giant beast plateau, the place behind the huge mountain that looked like the head of a giant beast, like the back of the neck. Mo asked, "Why here?" Fanny said, "I just want to build a colony on the top of this giant beast plateau, but I think its head is a little too scary, so I plan to build it here." "Very good, very Fanny style." Nanling sighed and said, "Okay, let's build it here. It's just a little troublesome anyway." He had no objection. If the boss wanted it to be like this, then so be it. Anyway, he would not be the one to operate the colony in the future. Besides, this colony was built at the back of the giant beast plateau, which would facilitate the exploitation of resources, which was also a good thing. Therefore, not long after, a small spaceship landed in the sky in flames. This was the landing module. This landing module was directly controlled by Li Ji and fell to the back of the head and neck of the giant beast plateau. Nanling and the other two also hurriedly flew over there. They wanted to find a suitable place to stay. The place was easy to find, but the entire ridge was full of various twisted lives. These lives have the characteristics of both animals and plants. They can exist through photosynthesis and are full of predatory instincts. This is very troublesome. Strictly speaking, these are all threats to the new colony. So Nanling volunteered to start setting fire. He was suspended in the air, and the fire-wing flying sword released a raging fire around him under the control of his mind. The flames soon burned a large area here into a white land. While the flames were still burning, the landing module had already fallen down. The landing module quickly unfolded after landing, forming a platform that occupied a large area. The platform was made of starship-level plates, which could definitely withstand the pressure. The platform was actually designed to be suitable for a variety of environments. It can build a suspended base on the sea, and even stand firm in the magma. It can be used in any environment, and can create a comfortable development base for young masters and young ladies in any harsh environment. This is the meaning of the landing module. The landing module unfolded, and the burning mountain fire was suppressed at once. Then, the robots that had been waiting for a long time in the small hangar in the landing module came out one after another, and began to prepare for production and mining according to the established procedures. The benefits of Li Ji becoming a digital life were undoubtedly revealed at this time. Everyone only needed to leave this matter to Li Ji. With her current computing power, she didn't even need to control it at all, and she could handle everything to perfection through the AI system of the Zhuoxia. Everyone could watch the robots complete the development operation by staying on the landing module with great effort. There were only constant roars around, that was the battle. Because the life forms on this planet obviously did not want to lose their territory, they were resisting the robot army. Nanling was not too worried about this, he just continued to control the fire-wing flying sword with his mind to set fire around. This level of fire could not affect the robot army, but it was fatal to the life forms on this planet. Fire was extremely restraining to them. Because their bodies were always in a very active state under the action of active factors. To put it more accurately, they were like living solid fuel, igniting when they met fire. Nanling thought for a while, looked at the various complete production equipment in the landing module, sighed, then looked up and said to Li Ji, "Sister Li Ji, help me drop my cargo hold down, I'm going to make something." About 10 minutes later, a stream of fire appeared above his head. That was his folding cargo hold that was thrown into the gravity projection device and was fallen rapidly towards this side. The gravity projection of the Zhuoxia was very advanced, and it began to slow down its falling speed after reaching the target. Nanling saw this and used the wind control technique to guide it. Soon, the cargo hold landed lightly on the floor of the landing module. He received his cargo hold, and then began to work with a smile. The fire-wing flying sword was just his first attempt. Now that this design has matured, he can make a new gift for his beloved System O. Chapter 250 Linyu Thunder Wing. The construction of the colony is in full swing, but Nanling doesn't need to worry about it. He just needs to do his own thing. He is designing a brand new wingsuit, with the best spiritual materials and the best spiritual patterns. In the process, he also learned a lot of thunder magic, and spent a lot of money to buy the copyright. But this can't stop him from making a gift for his dear System O. After mastering the basic essentials of thunder magic, he has made it into a spiritual pattern and engraved it on the new wingsuit. The most important thing is the production of the thunder furnace. When doing this, Nanling was afraid that his understanding of thunder spiritual power was not in place, so he specially called Mo to come for reference. When Mo arrived, he was actually suppressing joy and expectation in his heart. How could she not know what Nanling was doing? But she could only pretend not to care, waiting for the moment when the surprise was in front of her. So now she pretended to simply answer academic questions for Nanling, and had no intention of exploring who this thunder furnace was prepared for. Nanling could probably guess what System O was thinking, and he didn't say it out loud, so it would be interesting, right? So when the two of them were making the thunder spirit furnace together, there was always some pink emotional aura overflowing. One was preparing the gift seriously, and the other was teaching him how to make it seriously. What could be more loving than this? Even the furnace was filled with some warm emotions during the making process, making it seem to be able to emit some faint cheers when it was started. When the thunder spirit furnace was running, Nanling and Mo also looked up at each other as if they had sensed something. The feeling of dying hit each other at the same time, and then they quickly turned their faces away. At this moment, Nanling's figure paused slightly, and there was a slight change in the circulation of his spiritual power. Don't get me wrong, it's not a big deal. It's just that his cultivation of the 7th level of foundation building is in place, and he naturally entered the 8th level of foundation building. The 7th level of the spirit formation has been filled, and there are still 3 levels left. But after Nanling learned the fire technique and the thunder technique respectively, he had a different view on this matter. I always feel that his body seems to be able to withstand more. No one said that the foundation building must be 10 levels, right? Nanling didn't even dwell on his own cultivation. For him, it was just a matter of course. He said, Sister Mo, there is still the final assembly to do. Can you help me? Mo nodded and said, of course, I also want to see what new things you have made. So with Mo's help, she watched Nanling assemble the new moon in front of her with some anticipation. It is true that he needed Mo's help, because there were many magnetic equipment inside, and many parts did not even have installation and maintenance space reserved in his design, and Mo's magnetic control was needed to completely fit them together. The equipment made in this way was like a whole, and people could not even see the traces of patchwork. When the spirit furnace was installed in it and started running, the spirit power flowed in the internal spirit pattern, and the silver-white new moon had already overflowed with some spirit light. Nanling said with a smile, try it. Mo fondly stroked the textured new moon shell, feeling the hidden and ready-to-go thunder spirit power inside, and felt that this kind of equipment was perfect for her. The appearance of this crescent moon looks very beautiful, and its total arc length reaches 3 meters. However, its arc is not very large. It looks like a new moon has just appeared, and it looks like a slightly curved floating feather. It completely meets Mo's aesthetics, and its function is also tailor-made for her. What is this? She asked knowingly. Nanling said, a wingsuit, or a single soldier flying vehicle. Mo nodded and said, I know that the form of a wingsuit can't carry the inspiration of a guy like you. Is it, for me? She couldn't help it, and finally couldn't help asking. Nanling didn't think there was anything wrong with it, and nodded seriously and said, of course it's for my sister, come up with a good name for it. Mo smiled lightly, seemingly calm and indifferent, but in fact she seemed a little embarrassed. She said, I will give it a good name. The implication is that she won't tell Nanling now. Nanling was not surprised by this. He just stretched and said, okay, it's finally done. I'm going to have a good rest. Mo nodded and said nothing. She was very satisfied with the gift from her husband. As soon as Nanling left, she stroked the crescent-shaped aircraft and said, from now on, I'll call you Lingyu. As soon as the voice fell, the Lingyu seemed to understand and trembled slightly. Mo was a little surprised, and what was even more surprising was that she found that the Lingyu seemed to have been injected with some knife characteristics. Anyway, after simulating it in her mind, she felt that it could be used as a knife to cut people at certain times. Therefore, she was really convinced by Nanling's talent. How could he even think of such a tricky angle? Anyway, Mo was very happy. With a happy mood, she followed the method she learned from Nanling and injected her divine thoughts and spiritual power into the thunder spirit furnace. Soon, the Lingyu bloomed with cheerful electric light. To be honest, it might be more appropriate to call it magnetic moon, but Mo likes to call it feather moon. She couldn't wait to sit on it sideways, and then was carried by the feather moon to fly all the way. The feather moon also has 2 flight modes, one is stable flight, and the other is maneuverable flight. Stable flight is to always fly in a fixed posture with the moon wheel facing down, so that the owner can lie leisurely on the back of the arc surface that is wide enough. And maneuverable flight is to carry it on the back of the owner like a wingsuit to perform various maneuvers. There is no high-speed mode, because its speed depends only on the output of spiritual power. To be honest, after trying many postures in the air, Mo has come to the conclusion that this feather moon is probably similar to her original Rizzo-matching wingsuit in terms of maneuverability, and it is normal to have advantages and disadvantages in different aspects. But the advantage is the stable flight mode, which regards a single soldier aircraft as the key to daily fashionable travel. At this time, Mo leaned on her feather moon lazily, looking elegant and luxurious like a fairy in the moon palace. It really has a fairy style. Anyway, Fanny never looked away after seeing it, and her sparkling eyes were full of want. After estimating the price, Mo felt that this maneuvering mode alone was equivalent to her original wingsuit, which was nearly 5 million. Adding the other functions of the Lingyu, Mo felt that even if it was valued at tens of millions, it would not be a problem. If Nanling used this Lingyu to repay the debt, wouldn't it be paid off in one go? But things didn't work that way. Anyway, neither Nanling nor Mo had any intention of using it to pay off the debt. As for this money, it's owed, and Mo even hoped that Nanling would owe more and more. For this reason, she couldn't help but take stock of her property, and then couldn't help but send a message to her father. Well, it's time to ask for some pocket money from home. No, if the daughter gets married, shouldn't the father prepare the dowry? Don't think about shirking it. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.